The realisation has kicked in. It's our last bank holiday Monday hurling pod of the current season, which if anything else says there should be more bank holidays in the summer. There's far too much of a gap after the June bank holiday weekend. But this is a good one for us. We're looking ahead mainly to the provincial finals, which are coming up this weekend on the pod this week. We got Limerick and Cork meeting in the Munster decider. It feels fresh, even though these teams have played quite a bit in the championship over the last year and a bit. It's the first time they've met in the Munster final since 2014. If Limerick do lift the Mackey Cup at the weekend in front of their own supporters at the Gaelic grounds, it would be a record 7th straight Munster title for them. 2023, you all remember, Kilkenny won a dramatic Leinster final by a point against Galway. Late Killian Buckley goal. That day was far more remembered for the fact it was the day the lads both met up with Johnny Glynn before the game at Croke Park. Well, Glynn was back at Croke Park at the weekend, lifting the Mara Cup with New York. At the weekend, we hit the lower tier finals on there. London landing their first Christie ring since 2012, and we had Roscommon coming back from 4 points down late on to edge out their neighbours Mayo in the Rackard as well. Paddy McCormick, he missed last year's All-Ireland Under-20 final, made up for it this time round, scored 2 goals to help Tipperary overcome Kilkenny. They were crowned All-Ireland Under-20 champions for a 12th time. Very impressive indeed. They like playing against Kilkenny at Nowlan Park in underage finals, and there can be no doubt now, Tipp are very much back. Tipperary supporters have been tweeting me for the last 24 hours about it, so there you go. They're enjoying their success, Skehill. I don't know how you're finding this as Tipperary's number one outside fan.
Sorry, I need to divert for a second. I like the segue you did for Johnny Glynn there. Very impressive.
There you go. Yeah,
how long does it take you to write these down?
About 2 minutes there, 20 past 4 there. Before we started at 4:30, and I literally just went, right, how do we get from here to here to here so that we can get Tipper back right at the end? And then Johnny Glynn popped into mind because I remember that photo in the Croke Park Hotel. And I thought, this fits perfectly because I saw him in the stands when I was watching on TG Carr's YouTube at the weekend. And I thought, we'll get that in and that'll do as an intro.
That's professional right there, my friend.
There you go. Find the odd stat, like the 7 in a row potentially there. Sprinkle that in.
Editing.
You got yourself an intro, kids. Yeah. No one cares about the hurling this weekend, by the way. They all only really care about the meat. I was looking through the comments.
The meat?
Yeah, I mean, like this was a throwaway, and I mentioned we were 3 hours. This will give away what happened last Monday. We're 3 hours into a recording because we'd done the piece with Willie Mara first, and then we did the Hurling Pod's main pod on the other side of it. And then literally there was 3 hours up on the window on the recording, and next thing Skehill goes, "Hey lads, why don't we rank the meats that you've eaten and tell me about some strange meats that you've eaten?" And I couldn't believe it. I was like, we were ready to parachute out of the pod. Murph and I were looking at it going, I feel we've done enough here. And then Skehill brings us into another comment, power ranking meat. And it seems like nearly every comment that came in, both Spotify, on the Twitter, on the YouTube, were meat related. So can I throw a few of these at you, Skehill, before we get into the main stuff?
yeah, let's do it. I'm excited.
Like, why not, you know? This one came in from Marion O'Tuma, which was on YouTube. Has James Skehill ever eaten a fox?
Am I allowed to say this? No. I've shot a fox.
Yeah, but did you consume it afterwards?
I did not consume it. I shot it for the protection of lambs. So I shot a few foxes. Can I say that tonight? I can.
I think you can, yeah. You can say it in the pod.
It's not illegal. It's not illegal, so I can say it.
No, I mean, yeah. You're allowed to protect your
livestock,
your animals, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah, you are.
I think. Anyway, there you go.
You are.
This one came in from Danny Espana. I once rented an apartment from someone called Danny in Barcelona, so I wonder if it's the same person, and life has just caught up with me 15 years later. But Danny has said, a great listen once again. Surely Skehill had some roux when he was out in Oz. What are his thoughts on kangaroo?
Kangaroo, I have a kangaroo, yeah.
I have too. What did you think of it?
But I had it in Galway.
What?
Yeah, so the Christmas market, when it comes to Air Square in Galway, it has these... What would you call them? I was going to call them extravagant meats, kind of... I don't know what's the word for it, but you'd have a selection of like 10 or 12 different
exotic
ones.
Meat, I suppose.
Exotic, yeah. Exotic is the word, yeah. I don't want to call it exotic because it's kangaroo. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, had kangaroo as well. My list is at 19 now of meat. Yeah. And then I got on the most stupid... I said that for later. I have another list. It's going to cause eruptions of opinion anyway, if you ask me. Oh, and it's hardly related, in fairness. Yeah, so okay. I have a kangaroo. I have.
Okay, members pod list for that one, I think. I've had kangaroo as well. It's the only time I've ever got a call from my bank was the day I had kangaroo. So we're over for my friend's wedding in Australia, and he wouldn't let us put our hand into our pocket anywhere we went. So it was a case of his now in-laws put us up for the entire time that we were there. Basically, he drove us around everywhere, or one of his mates drove us around. We wanted to rent a car when we got to the airport. He wouldn't hear of it. He was like, hotels, just not happening. We didn't spend a penny. Myself and my mate went over to be his groomsman for the wedding. He thought this was the payback for us, enjoying ourselves as groomsmen for the days that we were out there. So the very last night we went up to this really fancy Michelin star hotel the restaurant within the hotel in Sydney. It's one of these high ones. It's over the city. You overlook it. We thought for himself and his now wife, this would be a great way for us to pay it back somewhat. Didn't look as you do at the menu. And it's always a sign when you're looking at the menu when there's no price on it that it is actually going to be quite pricey. So I said to my mate, I'm like, look, I'm going to just take this bill. Everything he's done for us, let's just do that. Turned out that the bill at the end of it was around $2,000.
Oh, fuck!
Which one was? And like it was I think $3,500 Australian. So like when you see it come out, you go, oh. Like the exchange rate wasn't too far off 2 to 1. So as you can imagine, right, so this was nighttime in Sydney. So I'm assuming in Ireland it was probably at some bizarre time as well, probably like really early in the morning. And the bank that I was using obviously saw your credit card has just incurred a cost of $2,000 randomly. And so they had to ring me while I was in the restaurant to confirm the actual payment. But we had very fancy kangaroo on 2 of the courses that we were having. Jeez. And I thought kangaroo was quite nice. It's a little bit of a kind of it's a bit of a bloody meat. But I found it was a bit gamey as well. We were talking about veal being a bit gamey last week. I thought kangaroo was as well. I didn't think it was that fancy though. And apparently in Australia it's not that fancy. Kangaroo is just eaten, fairly routinely.
It's probably fancy by the time it gets here. That's if you're
maybe if it's in a fair in Australia or a fair in Galway, maybe it is. But the 2 of you were over for the games in Sydney as well, weren't you? Did either of you hit kangaroo over there, no?
No, I missed that with work. I didn't go.
Okay.
No, missed kangaroo that time.
That was, what year was that?
2018.
It's 18,
yeah.
That's where we go for the roadshow.
Sydney.
Well,
well, when you were saying yesterday, you were like, put up a poll and see where we go for the roadshow. And I was like, well, now London and New York are hurling stronghouses after what's happened at the weekend. I'll happily go to New York if anyone wants us to go and link up with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's probably not great for our listeners to make it along. But if you want to come to New York, by all means, London is maybe more accessible. I'm definitely open for both. So there you go. And the other one that someone had asked, which I think I may well have deleted from the comments as I was putting them together earlier on. So if I don't have your name, I'll apologise for paraphrasing here. But somebody asked about what is your favourite steak? It was Aisha Hurley. Excellent pod as always, lads. I'd love to know what's Skehill's favourite cut of steak.
I love a rump steak. I love a sirloin. I love a T-bone.
You're now just naming all the types of steak.
That's like asking me what's your favorite glass to drink Guinness. I just doesn't matter. I just love what's in it. The meat. No, God. I'm going to say rump.
Okay.
That's it. I'm going rump.
Fair enough. Murph, do you have any favourite steaks?
I don't think so. I'm actually not the pickiest eater you'll ever come across. So anytime I'm having steak, I'd just be happy enough I'm having steak. I don't really... What did I put in the barbecue here a few weeks ago? I've put sirloin or striploin. One of them is good on the barbecue and the other one's not so great to have on. I can't remember because I made a stone.
Sirloin will be good on the steak.
Sirloin was good, yes. I bought striploin the following day. It's not a good idea on the barbecue. I don't know, it gets very chewy or something like that. But I actually wouldn't have a preference. I'd probably just say like T-bone or ribeye or something.
Yeah. Do you eat a lot of meat, steak? Why am I asking this question? I'm not sure why I'm asking you, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. Do you eat a lot of meat?
I don't. I had this conversation lately. I don't actually. The only reason... I don't really know why we don't actually, to be honest. But when we're having a barbecue, yeah, this time of the year, but not really, to be honest. I don't really eat that much. I can't remember why we had this conversation lately, but probably should. I don't know what the experts advise, but probably should have a bit more than I do. Iron and all that. Isn't that what they say with the steak? Yeah.
Can't go wrong. I'm not going to the Liver King kind of levels of meat consumption.
That's different. That's raw. And also the man is on steroids. So it's like
I watched the documentary and he killed a cow right abroad the field, okay? Yeah. And he drove into it and cut out the liver, right?
Yeah.
And then took a chew out of the liver raw. Like that man is psychotic. Yeah. He's mentally ill, like.
It's the biggest load of bullshit. No pun intended.
Right. I'm not familiar with this guy. So what's his thing? What's his gimmick?
Just go on Netflix, right?
Yeah.
Go on to Netflix, my friend.
He's on Netflix, yeah.
I think he's an Untold series.
Go on to Instagram there now, or Will. It might be easier to see it. He's a lad off his head on steroids. And basically what it is that he promotes this caveman type living, and he has these tenets is what they call it. Yeah, not tenets. And basically that you live like a caveman, eat raw liver, and you blah, 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 eat bone marrow and all this. he doesn't mention the fact that he's on an enormous amount of steroids. I think he might lately. I think the people have called him out on it. But yeah, so essentially, if it's one of these things, if you eat like him and train like him, you'll look like him, a big beard on him, all this sort of crack. But it's a big, enormous gimmick.
You'd call it the paleo diet extremism, wouldn't you, Murph?
Yeah. Well, like, to be honest, I think what a lot of people have accepted what it is that if you have a good brand, you can sell a lot of supplements to people who are willing to get roped in. So basically, they put this fella out front and center, and you can buy all these supplements off him, and you can blah 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 do all this. And he's front and center, basically saying that this is the lifestyle I live. Like, there's loads of these videos of him going walking in the rain.
Right,
They're gimmicks, yeah.
Gimmicks, yeah.
So a big company are behind him, kind of just, I suppose, just peddling the stuff and are peddling all this stuff, that eat this and take this powder in the morning and whatever. And
it's never a good sign, lads, where someone has a Wikipedia page, right? And controversies are actually longer than career in early life. So obviously lots of people are questioning the dietary advice because he's heavily involved in supplements, which he is selling through a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
And then apparently emails came out that he was buying $11,000 worth of steroids and testosterone as well.
He was interviewed on I'm fairly sure I saw some clips. I didn't bother listening to the podcast. There's Andrew Schultz and these lads, people might be aware, seeing them, the comedians, but they did a real serious interview with him, like trying to call him out on and stuff. I was like, there's no point in even looking at that, because he's on it, like, and what's the again, it's just another kind of a yarn to spin so that he gets more publicity. That's mad stuff. It is. But
also sounds like the class thing to do as well. So you go on the juice and then you say, the reason that actually I'm so strong is that I'm consuming all this protein in its rawest possible form. So I'm digging out livers and I'm eating uncooked meat, and obviously it's the juice that has him looking the way he is. He's between 47 and 50 apparently. Again, his early life is a little bit foggy on a lot of the detail that's on the Wikipedia, but I have a feeling he may well be updating his own Wikipedia because he has his amount of followers on social media in there as well. So
wait until he gets a dose of what's called liver fluke. Ooh. He won't be the fucking liver king then. Tell you one thing.
So Tommy Walsh, not that Tommy Walsh, was onto us on Spotify as well, as he likes to be known. Can I request just one thing, and anything but Hurling Pod, and let's see where it goes. Do you know what, mate? We're 12 minutes into this now, and we're making a fairly good stab and not doing any hurling whatsoever. So, maybe we met your request. Gary Heelan as well thinks we have a lot less time than we do. Will, I know you get a lot of comments to get through and are extremely busy, if only. But if you get a chance, can you put this to Skehill about going on Ireland's Fittest Family, just for his reaction? I had a comment on last week's section as well about it. Gary Heelan, a proud Tipperary man. Would you ever consider going on Ireland's Fittest Family and potentially going up against Davy?
Well, me and my sister spoke about this before, years ago. So is the rule you have to have a parent?
I think so.
I think so, yeah. I think so.
Yeah, my mother is not, no. She wouldn't be able for that. That would kill her. She's 64. Oh shit! I shouldn't have said her age. She's in her 60s. so she's 60s. So
she gets to take the bus into Galway for free from next year. Is what you
not physically able, as the lad says. But me and my sisters, yeah, we would. But do you know what to do? They'd land me on Davy's team for sure.
Well, that's exactly what would happen. Yeah,
and let him fuck the head of me for an hour solid on television many times a week. I don't know what it is.
Sounds like good TV. I could see James Skehill and his good lady wife going back onto Gogglebox to watch themselves on Ireland's Fittest Family at some point and having to react to themselves but on Davy's team.
What's that film? Tom Cruise or whoever they go, show me the money. Is that what they say?
Jerry Maguire.
Jerry Maguire, come on.
I don't know how much there is to say about Davy's ban. We may as well probably touch on it now. So as far as I know, the 8 weeks kick in right now. I saw a lot of people were saying at the weekend, oh, that doesn't feel like punishment. And it's just kind of the way the GA rules are. So also people were wondering, well, how come if he's getting sanctioned for comments that he made principally about Johnny Murphy, but about referees more generally? He did say there are referees up and down the country that despise him, and that's the reason he got the ban, was that he basically brought things into disrepute by saying that referees were out to get Antrim, effectively. He didn't get banned for the Offaly game because it was going through the process of basically being referred for a ban, and then he sought a hearing, which meant that the hearing happened midweek last week, so it was after the Offaly game, which is the reason that he wasn't suspended from managing in that one. It's 8 weeks. Look, if he's going into club in July somewhere, he won't be able to manage at that point. So he'll have to wait until the suspension runs up. It is a weird one. I think in a lot of other sports you get a game-based ban, so it would be a case of he would be facing the sanction in the league next year as opposed to it being now. But I don't know, Murph. Go on.
So I just ask you, when does the ban start? Is it from the date Like, is it from the date he said it? Is it from the date of the hearing? Is it from the date?
I think it'll probably be from the date that the suspension has been handed out, because obviously he didn't serve a suspension for the last game of the Leinster Championship. So if it was backdated to the start, sure, he didn't have to serve it for that game.
So it's starting now, effectively. He's only half a week through, says you.
Yeah.
It's pointless enough, really, isn't it?
It is a little bit, but I suppose in a way the GA can always point around and say they actually protected the referees. Like if they had just allowed this to slip by, Murph, you would have a case where it would be, well, sure, it's open season, so you can say whatever you want about referees without sanction.
Yeah, I remember when I'm fairly sure I remember ballpark when this came in. Like if I'm right in saying there wasn't really a rule there that you could do this or couldn't do this up until around 15 or 16. But I just vaguely remember Brian saying something to us that, look, lads, if anyone's being interviewed, it's like, what you call it? My memory of it is like the face guard rule or one of them. I remember coming in and saying, listen, if you say anything in an interview about it, you're going to probably get sanctioned. You know, in terms of if you say the referee didn't have a bad game, something at the lower level, but it just hasn't been invoked. If I'm right in saying that, wide open to a correction here now that it hasn't been in since like the 1990s. But I remember Brian saying that to us, saying, look, lads, if you've given an interview after game, not that any of you would, but don't be going out there saying the referee was poor or anything like that, because you may get banned. There was something like that. And I don't think I don't know, is there anything, maybe there might have been something in football or something, but I don't remember any big stories in hurling that came out that someone called out a referee, that there was that triggered this being brought in. Yeah. But it was, I think by its nature, it's going to be slow enough moving. The fact
to your knowledge, lads, is this the first ban he served for? I know was the comments detrimental to the association? Was the classification of the rule? Is it?
Yeah, it was bringing the association into disrepute, I believe, was the exact wording that they used.
So let's say when he's plenty of managers up and down the country have gone at referees before, after games, during games, whatever. So how does that differ, if you know what I mean?
Well, I think like if you are, let's say, during a game and you abuse a referee, that's quite black and white. You've abused the referee and you shouldn't be doing that, or whatever the case is. But afterwards, I suppose he was basically asserting that there was a group of people out after him that disliked him, and that essentially there's a cohort there that actively, outside of the game are actively after him to try and, put a hoodoo on him or whatever. So basically what you're saying there is that there's more than just getting hot-headed during a game and, giving out to a fella. You're saying that there's actually an effort out there, a group of people have come together and that they are, out to kind of hamper his progress as a manager or something like that. So that's a different level. That's basically, that's not just abusing him.
So the biggest difference to this as well would be that if, say, the referees had been walking off the field in Salt Hill that day, and if Davy Fitzgerald had gone over and shouted at the referee would have put that into his notes, basically, and then it would have went for sanction at that point. So it would have been in his referee's report. In this case, Dave Fitzgerald is speaking to Siobhan Madigan on the radio after the game, whatever it was, 15, 20 minutes after full time. The referee has no opportunity to act on that because it's happened outside of the game itself.
Yeah.
I remember it was a very similar ban happened to Shane Curran when he was managing in Westmeath a couple of years ago. I think he was a Colliery manager at the time. And basically he went on the radio, and there were also comments that the local journalist had stuck in the papers in Westmeath the week after, where he had criticised the officials and felt that there wasn't fair play for his team. And similarly, he was found at a local level to have brought the game into disrepute and was given a suspension. So I think it was roughly the same as this. I don't think it was quite as long, but the 8 weeks are probably taking into account the fact that Davy had said that referees were out to get his team. Like that clearly brings all referees into question.
Right.
Which I suppose they
it's an odd one versus you. Yeah.
Well, there you go. The other suspensions. So I think we were expecting these when the red cards went missing at Parnell Park. But so Conor Donoghue is going to miss the preliminary quarter-final for Dublin against Kildare or against Laois. This to me is no surprise, Murph. I mean, we saw this absolutely wild swipe that came across. There was no chance he was not going to get sanctioned for that.
No, there wasn't. No, and I think Derek Fahy, did he get his?
He got one as well. Yeah, so he's missing the final as things stand, unless he wins an appeal this week.
I was surprised in that one, to be honest, because I think the Conor Donoghue one's fairly clear cut. It's very obvious, and then the other one, there's not a whole lot in it. I put it this way: we've seen. It seems like that players are more likely to get a retrospective red card than the red card they got on the day being taken away from them. Because we've seen quite a few red cards that should have been taken away, but I don't think any, to my memory, this year have been taken away. Thinking of Alan Tynan against Kilkenny with the shoulder that wasn't the shoulder into the head. I'm thinking about, who was it for Offaly, Waterford.
Was it Mann?
Yeah, Mahon. Yeah, James Mahon, wasn't it?
James
It's
Mahon,
I'm thinking about his one as well. And the only thing that I thought of was I'd kind of forgotten about these red cards afterwards, and then I heard that the lads are after getting now sanctioned first. And it's just the first thing that I thought of is that you're more likely as a player. And I'm not knocking the fact that they will retrospectively look back and gave him a red card, but my mind jumped to the other ones to say, like, Jesus, if we were a bit more clinical, there a few more lads would have actually got red cards taken away from them as well. So that was my only view on it. But look, to be fair, Conor Donoghue can have no arguments. I think in hindsight, even though I said last week on the pod that Derek Fahy was very lucky, I am kind of surprised that he did get a retrospective one, because usually you see them ones they just move on and they don't, whereas Conor Donoghue's is a bit more clean cut than that one, you know?
Yeah. So all indications are that Galway are going to appeal this. So the Central Competitions Control Committee usually meet on a Monday, but I wonder with the bank holiday, will that be a case of tomorrow? Because the bans were handed out on Thursday morning off the back of a meeting on Wednesday. So I think that's the earliest opportunity that Galway have to appeal it. If they were to lose that, they could appeal up until basically DRA at the end of the week. So I don't know, Skehill, what you're taking it as a Galway man. I mean, we were saying last week he was maybe a little bit lucky to get away with it. Like for people who didn't see it, he passes the ball away and then he makes contact with Jamison Murphy's leg after the ball has gone away, basically.
Yeah, well, let's just take out the fact that it's a Galway person in question here, right? I just think it's a tricky road to go down when you have an incident that's kind of, let's say, on the borderline, you know what I mean, in terms of damage done. So I don't know who I can understand. That was, to me, that's dangerous, very dangerous. That could have done, you know, big damage to Fleming in the throat neck area. So that to me, does, I suppose, warrant retrospective ban, being honest, right? Derek one, I'm not sure. I think you can go through the games as a whole and pick out multiple incidents, even the one the day after with Cork, you know, and Waterford. I think there was an incident there with one of the Cork lads, or vice versa. Waterford lads hitting the Cork lads. You know, does that go into the same bracket or whatever? I don't know. I just think it's a dangerous. I get where it's going. I get what the purpose behind it. I think the process started in the Sunday game. I think the process started back then. The incidents got a huge amount of coverage, and it's like they were pushing these incidents, you know, for, I suppose, to drive public, you know, interaction, was to drive viewership, whatever it was, okay. And they completely condemned it without fault, and were nearly pushing for retrospective ban to be brought into place, you know. So I just think that's a bit of a dangerous category there, to be honest. Now, if we see games going on in the future and there's instances where we think that in the terms of the rule book they classify as red card, are counties going to start pushing for this? Do you know who pushes for this? Is there a committee? Is the referees board? Like what? How does this come about? Like who's this? I'm asking you. Where does it start? Where does it stem from? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, those who are on the CCCC who would be referring this, I assume, were sitting down probably watching the game, first of all, when it would have been on live. And like we all agreed that particularly the Donoghue one seemed very strange that it wasn't a red card at the time. But definitely I'd say you'd have to be impacted by the fact that, a highlights programme is then highlighting it quite strongly, and then the clips go online afterwards. And I would say there was a push, particularly at whatever the Derek Fahy one, but the other one being a red card and getting a ban, straight away it's in the public consciousness, probably more so than it would have been even during the game.
Yeah, but see, correct. You know, in rugby terms, they do they have a
citing commissioner. Yeah.
So is that in the game of hurling and football at the moment?
I'm not sure exactly what the process is, but I do know someone who sits on the DRA, so I can ask them and come back to you for next week about it.
I'd love to know, because I just feel like this, and I'm not trying to make this low level, right? But I feel like there's a WhatsApp group for this committee, and they throw in the WhatsApp. I think Derek Fahy should get banned. I think Arnold should get banned. Let's have a meeting or Zoom, and boom.
I don't really have a problem if that is the case, because I don't expect these lads to sit every Monday morning either. Like, and go. Presumably, everyone on it has jobs, and it's like, right, lads.
I would like to. What I'm trying to get at, though, is I would like to think there's a more formal process behind this. That I watched someone that was. What I'm trying to get at, right? And I don't mean saying this in a bad way. And it sounds bad because I'm from Galway, but I don't want someone to be emotionally influenced by the Sunday game to then create this process to start. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I get you. Yeah.
Because then, well, okay, if people in the Sunday game are sitting in, and there's a Limerick man in the Sunday game or a Cork man, and an instant hand happens, and it's borderline, and there's no card, is he or she going to start pushing for this to be reviewed? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just very, very grey for me, particularly when incidents happen throughout the course of the league that weren't grey for me. Like the tiny one we spoke about. And the reason we were given, correct me if I'm wrong now, Will, the reason we were given was because we were potentially, I suppose, jeopardising the referee's reputation or interpretation of rules back then, wasn't it?
Maybe.
I'm trying to choose my language very carefully.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah.
You know, so if that wasn't grey, and some of these incidents are grey. Now, come here, Derek Fahy, can I just say it, right? in the heat of the game, if the umpire spots that, it's a red card. So I have no issue with that whatsoever. I have no issue whatsoever. But I'm just saying the severity of the swing, you could say, did it warrant a retrospective ban? For me, I'm like, no, it's not. Don't know who's one in the same breath. I'm like, yeah, it is. But like, would I be here sitting here crying if he didn't get sent off or didn't get a retrospective ban? No. I'm just saying, let's move on. You know what I mean? That's it. Now, there has to be some kind of action, don't get me wrong, but I just think it's too great for me, is what I'm trying to get out here. The process itself needs to be more formal, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, look, the feeling was last week that Galway were going to appeal this. So maybe by the time the people get this podcast, maybe he's been cleared on appeal and he can play in the Leinster final. But sure, we shall see what happens.
Like, come here, can I ask you then? Like, okay, if it's going to appeal it, right?
Yeah.
So how do you get off that appeal? Like, what do you point towards? Is there a specific rule in the association that they can point towards? It's not
have either of you faced the disciplinary before? No.
Rugby, yes. Hurling, no.
Never hurling, right? Okay.
Never.
But as far as I know, basically he'd be brought in front of the disciplinary committee and would have to make the argument that he didn't intentionally maybe hit with the hurl or he didn't intend to hit his opponent. I think it's a tricky enough one to get off unless you're going to argue that it wasn't. You know, because even the severity doesn't really matter. It's still striking, which is what's in the rule book.
There's no really mitigating factor in it because I think one of the things is that if he fumbled the ball went behind him, he could say, "Listen, I was straight back trying to get the ball, and that wasn't what I meant." But he handed the ball off to whoever, I can't remember the other player he handed it off to, and then it's the thing is that I don't see him getting off with it now because it's happened. But if you ask me on.
Listen, one or two things, Murph, in my book. It's either A, mistake on identity, which we know that's not the case, or B, accidental versus intentional. It's either accidental or versus intentional. You know, that's the next one. So mistaken identity, move that aside. Okay.
Yeah.
Accidental versus intentional. And I hate to say it, but as a Galway person, it looks intentional to me. So it's so how do you defend that? Like, how do you? Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
If I was a solicitor, I would try and argue it wasn't a strike. But the problem is that's all you could argue, really.
He's nearly better off. Was it years ago? It went to was it Diarmuid Connolly or someone went to like a real serious level? Well, I can't even remember what it was. Do you remember there was something rumbled on for weeks?
Went to the DRA anyway,
Wasn't there solicitors got involved? You're nearly better off if it goes to that level because the solicitor will get it sorted for you. But if it's at the lower threshold where you have to argue it yourself, you're goosed. You know, you're caught. Like, I mean, if myself and Skehill had to go in and defend ourselves, let's say I put myself in Derek Fahey's boot, I'm going, how am I going to defend that? Like, they have me now. It's up to me to prove that it wasn't intentional, that I didn't strike him, that you can't. You know,
the trouble is you can't even argue, let's say, emotional distress because that's up to you to maintain that. You know, it's up to you to maintain control. Absolutely, as a player, you know, that's what they say about your obligation. You know, is to withhold a certain level of standard, emotional control during sport. Of course, it is. You know, so this one I'd be taking my bait and moving on.
So the one that I always remember that went all the way and almost basically started the DRA was July 2004, which was Rory O'Connell. So he got a 3-month ban by the GAA from, I'm going to say it was the Offaly Westmeath replay, possibly in the quarterfinal. So he was banned and he was going to miss the Leinster final. So ultimately he took a court challenge against the appeal ruling, which meant that he was able to play in the final against Laois, which Westmeath won. And I think his appeal was ultimately rejected in the courts afterwards. So he served the ban the other side of it, but he got to play in the Leinster final because the appeal process was in the courts. And that basically was the one that essentially was one of the ones that brought around the DRA.
Okay, to kind of speed up the process and
and to also keep it out of courts. The idea that at least the GAA would be the ones who would be dealing with it internally, as opposed to this ending up, you know, potentially going to somewhere like the High Court. Because at what point would it stop? Like, say if you got a suspension late in the summer, I knew there was an All Ireland final coming around. Well, sure, I'll just keep appealing it legally. And then they can't enforce my suspension, and sure, I'll take the suspension when the club season comes around.
Yeah, you bring it to Europe.
So, well, there you go. Yeah, exactly. So I just remember the Rory O'Connell one clearly, but he did still get to play in that Leinster final, and Westmeath won it. So ultimately, it worked out from that point of view. Before we get into the previews for the weekend, I actually missed a couple of the other meat questions which came up. But some of them are just comments. GF James Scales' power rankings are actually 1 Limerick, 2 Cork, 3 Veal, 4 Alligator, 5 Tipp, and 6 Kilkenny. It's very, very, very good indeed.
Very good.
And there was definitely one here about Springboks as well that came up. Where has it gone now? Oh, here's one before that. Johnny O'Connor. I lived in Canada previously. We went camping and a bear wandered into the camp. One of the Canadians shot the bear, took it away, and weeks later came back and said, "Taste this." He had cured the meat of the bear, put it into sausage casing and cooked it. Although it was like chewing through rope, it wasn't the worst meat I've ever tasted. I think A grizzly bear is probably up there with the strangest meats that people have eaten.
It'd be up there in terms of claim to fame in saying that you've eaten something like, and I completely understand how we ate that. I definitely tried myself to say I ate grizzly bear, but I mean the pun intended that it's going to be fairly grizzly type meat. Like, I mean, it's, you know,
But I could work.
Do you know what I mean? There to be got.
But is that not like desperation standard? You know,
eating a grizzly bear. Well, I mean, if you're going either hunting, killing, or eating a grizzly bear, things have gotten fairly poor. Something's gone wrong. Yeah, something's gone wrong.
It would have been if they were lost in the Canadian glaciers and it was anything to eat. I think it's the fact that his mate went off, cured the meat for a few months, and then snuck it back out at the barbecue with the lads in the middle of summer and went, here's some sausage meat.
I know I'm missing one too. I know I'm missing something obvious. My list is at 18, not 19. It comes to me again.
Yeah. Keep
I'm going to get
it
it
in
really
mind.
fast.
Grizzly bear would also start a new list of worst ways to go if you saw a grizzly bear coming. Just jeez, there's no way to get away from him. Like the only way you have these conversations, you might be having a few pints, have these conversations with friends. This is definitely probably a member spot type conversation, but like there's no way you're getting away from that. Like grizzly bear, you're out in the and I'm so surprised. You know, when you see all these like campers, you see all these videos online of like lads who are out hiking and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, I came across a grizzly." It's like, where were you? Well, I was in northern Canada. Where else were you expecting not to see a grizzly? Like, was northern Canada and cougars? It's like I would just not have hiking as a hobby if I lived there. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm always gobsmacked with these videos where lads are like, oh, "I'm so surprised I came across a brown bear." So where were you? Well, I was in a national park where it's all brown bears. Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Did you see more of Mount Etna erupted?
Saw that.
Yeah, so like, let's get a few tourists into a volcano that could potentially erupt. Like, fuck that, like,
yeah.
And it erupts.
Well, I did a parachute jump years ago. Again, completely off that. I did a parachute jump years ago. So no, not into Mount Etna. That's not where to do the training.
Northern Canada.
But I went to do the course, like, and I did one jump. Now this is.
Are you a paratrooper then? Could you call a paratrooper?
Not at all. No,
Did you go by yourself?
I went by myself, yeah.
We just moved to hurling side.
I know, like, this is so massively off topic, but I only watched the Bin Laden documentary last night, and I was watching the Navy SEALs doing the drop when their helicopter broke. But anyway, go on, keep going.
Yeah, but I was overseas with a fella who basically said, like, parachuting is his sport. And he was like, "Listen, you have to come to Clonbalog, I think, is an Offaly."
Yeah, there's a site there, yeah.
So, like, went and did the parachute jump anyway. 14,000 feet, I think it was. This was in 2010 or something like that. So, like, 3 hours instruction or something like that. I can't remember what it was. And then jumped out of the plane, landed by myself, pulled the parachute, steered it in, the whole lot. Landed, you know, I was happy enough. I got up, and sure, obviously there's big adrenaline buzz. I was like, geez, this is brilliant, like, fantastic. And we're stopping off in Abbey Leaks on the way back. Going into a chipper, and I could barely get out of the car. I was like, well, I could get out of the car, but my hip was dead. I was like, what the fuck is this? And I was like, yeah, that'll happen. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, I landed perfect. And he was like, no, like, you mean you'd probably just smash your hip there, and you could bust your leg, and you could do this. Even if you land perfectly, you know, there's lots of things that can happen. And I was like, this isn't conducive with hurling. Like, this crack that you go jump out of a plane, land, you appear to land well, but the adrenaline kind of, you know, you might tweak something, or you might roll an ankle, or you might do whatever. Do you know? I was like, you can't be doing this if you want to go out and hurl a match then the following evening. So I did one, and I was like, leave the parachute there. No point in doing that anymore.
I can't wait to go back. I did a skydiving in Australia that time.
Yeah.
And in fairness to the guy who was flipping struck onto me, he had me convinced for 3 hours that I was too heavy and that we had a chance that we might make it. But he was like, actually, let's try it anyways. And I was like, actually, let's try it anyways. What's the worst that can happen? The most frightening part of it, right, is we went up in the plane, up to the clouds. And when he pulled the door, it was just a cloud. Right?
Yeah.
I couldn't see shit.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, oh, fuck. So then we jump into the cloud, obviously. And it's just like someone turns on the lights then when you come out of the cloud.
Suddenly come out of it, yeah.
Flex. And we're bombing it down the road.
But you've whatever. Unless you pass clouds, you have no perception that you're actually bombing it. So it's a clear day that I did it. And I passed through a cloud at one stage, but there's no reference points. Sure, you're just falling. So, like, you feel the wind hitting you in the face, but you're like, am I falling? Like, what's the story? But I know it is good in fairness to it now. But just
what else have you done? Have you done like any deep diving stuff?
But before you do that, Tommy Walsh is getting exactly what he wanted here. This has turned into now an entire non-hurling club. But go on.
Can you fly anything and drive anything crazy?
No, like fly anything. No.
Can you like drive a tank?
We don't have tanks in the army, but I armored personnel carriers. Yeah. No. If you want to hand forward some money to buy one, Skehill, I'm sure the government will be happy. But
do the UN give you tanks over there then?
No.
Say if you go on a peacekeeping, no tanks at all.
No. No, you bring them yourself. The UN doesn't just have like vehicles like that, like main battle tanks and stuff. Like they cost. I'm going to go off the top of my head here now. They probably cost 1.5 million, maybe 2 million for one of those.
One tank.
Yeah. Fuck. They're impressive. I was in Finland there last year and I was seeing some of theirs, and like sure they're 40 tons, 50 tons, like they're enormous things.
Why did I think it was going to be the price of a tractor?
I know, yeah. yeah.
Makes no sense.
Why am I more and more worried if Ireland was ever to get invaded now that we rely on the RAF for air support and we've no tanks?
This is a conversation for another podcast. I'm sure it's an ongoing conversation within Ireland in the defence space. It's not.
Have you been in a helicopter?
Not for me. Oh yeah, I've been in loads of helicopters. Yeah.
Could you fly a helicopter?
No, I can't fly a helicopter. Like that's like literally there is an enormous. Not say enormous fail rate for people who go to fly helicopters and planes, but it's very tough. Like you have to be very academic to go and fly it. In terms of what we have, definitely. I have done, like I did I was on a helicopter a lot in Chad, but one good one that was very good was you do one in Lebanon where you fly the blue lines. The blue line is where Lebanon and Israel is separated, but you do a blue line patrol, but you do it in a helicopter with the door open and you're strapped sideways, looking out. So it's very much like you're flying. Now, I tell you, when you get strapped in at the start, you're like, I'm very aware that it's just this harness that's holding me from leaning out the side. But that was
Were you holding the gun?
No, it was just a patrol to like observe over the blue line.
That
wasn't the role I was in. It's not. You're thinking of what would you call it now?
He's Black Hawk Down.
Black Hawk Down.
One of those films. They're in different capacity there.
There you go. You might enjoy the last episode of the Bin Laden one then as well, because they were in and I promise we're getting to the previews in a second. This like Poochie where they're trying to go to the factory and the episode just ends and they end up not getting to the preview at all. But basically in the last episode of that, one of the helicopters ends up going too low and ends up crashing. And then what they had to do was the guys couldn't actually do the drop in the way they had planned. So they were going to drop in on top of Bin Laden's bunker, essentially. And they'd be inside the 18-foot wall around the compound was the plan. So this is going to be like this. They have these special helicopters and we're going to let them get fairly close. One of them went too far down and got dragged down and ended up crashing. And next thing the problem they had was people on social media were pointing out that there was an American helicopter which was down in the middle of the town. And it was like, cover is blown. So we've no possibility now of extracting the guys and doing the drop again. We're basically there. And it was just make it up on the fly. The guys had to go and break through. I think it was a car lot door, which was there to allow the cars to come in now, the compound. They had to just blow that and go in. And they ended up totally in the wrong position. But they still ended up getting in. So. Yeah,
I watched that. It's a good documentary in fairness. Yeah. The thing with the helicopter there was that there's because there's high walls in the compound and the helicopter flies over it. When it goes into a hover, it gets the swash from the helicopter, which basically is the air being pushed down to the ground that allows it to flow. That then came back up from the high walls, went back to the propeller. So now there was no, let's say, thrust downwards for the helicopter to stay up. So it just dropped it was basically kind of almost like a vacuum. It just dropped. So it couldn't have power. Yeah.
That's a great explanation.
There you go.
Next time we meet you in person, right? And we meet in person. Hurling talk is barred, okay? I'm going to go through you with questions about the army.
Well, one last one I had, which you might enjoy. I was on a course in Finland last year, and part of it was helicopter patrols. But they would have very small helicopters that would be made very, very agile, essentially. So part of the thing that you were doing was you had to fly over these small areas, and you had to report what you could see from the helicopter and say, could you see tanks? Could you see artillery? What could you see? But you didn't know that one of the parts of the serials was essentially to simulate that if someone was firing at you from the ground, that you had to do evasive flying, essentially. So we're flying over this place, and we're flying at a decent enough height. And but it was like you're in a little fish tank. It was a glass kind of a helicopter, and I was looking down, and we're meant to be looking for this, like for tanks or for artillery pieces. And the man said, "What can you see?" The pilot was going, "What can you see?" And I was like, "It just looks like there's." It actually looks like there's two lads down there. He's like, do they have guns? And he was teeing me up and I didn't see it coming. I was like, they do, yeah. And next thing, like my stomach came into my mouth. He just big drop down and a swirl away. And then like does all this kind of really low flying over trees as if, he has to do evasive flying. One of the most, I'd say the closest I ever came to getting sick now and something like that. It was good though. No, it was obviously a cool experience. Like,
class.
That'll be more their style now, the finish.
So, Will, just so you know, right, this is the Members Pod.
Feels a bit like
right?
it, doesn't it?
Yeah, we've done it. We're 40 minutes in and we haven't spoken a minute of actual preview. So.
It's actually a fair point. Are you able to do an upside down way that way, Will? Are you?
Last week.
Yeah, we did it last week. Yeah, just that brings us around to a comment. I think we'll still keep this in main pod territory, so Skehill can keep his list for the other pod, because I'm intrigued. He never told us what that list was before we started, so there could be something cracking in that.
True.
But Dermot was making the point on Spotify. Dermot's from Limerick. Love the podcast, lads. However, I subscribe to the Off the Ball members to hear the extra hurling pods. I have no interest in football or in soccer. This is now the second members only podcast which is made available free to air. So just to kind of explain and just to address why we did that last week. So with Willie Maher on, so Willie Maher approached us to have a chat about how things were going, particularly with the hurling committee and how he was getting on after a couple of months in his role as the director of hurling. And so I thought it made sense, at least from last week's point of view, to put that out to as wide an audience we possibly could. So that's the reason we decided to do it. The other one, which we made free, I think was actually behind a paywall for quite a while, maybe for a couple of weeks. And then people said, look, this conversation goes a bit away from hurling. I think it would be good for people to be able to hear it for free. And that's the reason that we made that free pod. You will have members pods between now and the end of July, essentially. So we're not moving away from that, just in case you think we're being unfair there. And I can understand, obviously, Dermot is subscribing for hurling pods only, and obviously we will always welcome you doing that. So he says then, I think I'm going to save my subscription next season and put the euros towards inflating ticket prices. Again, love the pod. Yeah, I mean, the Munster final is pricey. Like 50 quid for provincial finals is getting tasty. Mm-hmm. It really is. Like, as much as we love the game and as much as there's, ridiculous demand for tickets at the moment as well, 50 to me sounds pricey. To me, it should only really get to 50 around All-Ireland semi-final stage. I think tickets in general are becoming more and more expensive, which is why I can totally understand why, Croke Park is not filling out for quite a few games. Even the meeting of the last two All-Ireland champions yesterday in the football, and 38,000 I think was the official attendance. And I think the fact that there's so many games on at the moment and it's so expensive to go to games, it's a big part of why people just can't go to everything. And then the other one came in from Mick Bear One that I wanted to address, because I will mention what happened in the finals around Croke Park on Saturday. Really enjoy the podcast. Always hook us in by being nice before you criticise us. I do believe you are genuine in wanting hurling promoted nationwide. However, every year so far you've ignored the Ring Racket and Mara Cups. Instead of doing a preview or a focus on who's driving hurling in these counties, you've skipped a week or did something entirely differently. I actually think the stories will be very interesting and could offer a real eye-opener to hurling, which is off Broadway, which I think we used that line with Willie Maher last week as well. I think there's a fair point in that. I think the thing that we probably have to consider, and jump in either of you if you think I'm wrong on this, is that we obviously have to be very aware that when it comes to the main podcast, as like last week, people were probably there for chat about Cork and Waterford and how the group stage is finished. So at least when it came to the main pod last week, that was going to be kind of naturally the focus. I think maybe for some bonus pods, particularly let us know in the comments, whether that be on your podcast feed or whether that be on the YouTube, if you would be interested in some of those pieces where we find one or two people and chat to them. Because in the kind of wider off the ball sense of things, we did have a couple of the New York hurlers and their manager on. We spoke to the London camp last week ahead of the finals at Croke Park. But maybe that's something for the hurling pod. I still kind of think that generally when we have tried some of these things before, the listeners obviously drive this pod and where it goes. I think the interest is more in the chat that the three of us have around things, as opposed to us bringing other people in, with the exception of special occasions like where we brought on Willie Maher last week for a chat, or we had Tony O'Gregan on early in the year to talk about the psychology around teams and stuff. Generally, I think it's better receiving as three of us just chatting about games, but I'm totally up for the idea of us doing something next year ahead of it, and maybe that's actually a really good way of doing it. So again, let listeners guide what we do from here, but let us know if you'd be interested in such a thing, and maybe that is actually a nice way of us getting into it rather than it being on main programming, if that makes sense. Okay, so I think that's all the correspondence that we need to deal with this week, and thank you for all your comments and messages and so on. There are a few other little questions that we can maybe keep for the members pod or use later on, particularly one about goalkeepers and outfielders going into goal, which I think we can do after the previews. What happened the weekend just gone by? Skehill, you said, and did you watch the under-20 final? You were like, under-20 chat is now banned in this WhatsApp group at the weekend.
I watched the second half.
Oh, so you watched basically Tipperary's pull away in the second half, essentially. Then,
yeah, I don't think there's any question when like when you go through the I suppose the preparation phase of the under-20s, you have a whole host of challenge games against all the counties you're not going to be facing in your province, obviously. So we played Tipperary a couple of times, and they were definitely the best team. They're the best team nationally, so I don't think there's any cams or questions about them winning that championship. So they were very well deserved.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know. Like, I was, again, as a perfect neutral watching this game on the telly on Saturday, like, I just felt they were cut above, particularly in the second half. The wind had an impact during the game, definitely, and you could even see that impact on the free taking. But I look at that Tipperary team, and now they've won a couple of minors recently. I'll go through their full run of success in the last 2 or 3 years in a second, because I saw Tipper back, and that's a fact, had it up during the weekend. But second half there, again, I mentioned at the top of the show, Paddy McCormick scores 2-1. Conor Martin gets 1-4 during the game as well. McCarthy was very good again with his frees. But I look at that inside forward line now at this stage, and you take O'Donoghue into account as well. They're well set, Tipperary. Basically they've now got a young, very interesting inside forward line, and that's aside from lads like Sam O'Farrell, the captain, who made a bit of history. I was trying to tease that out with you yesterday, lads. Did you work out in the end, Skehill, what he did that emulated Anthony Cunningham, your former manager, in the end?
Haven't a clue.
Captain Tipperary, and obviously Anthony captain Galway, to minor and under 20/21 success.
And would he be one of the only lads doing that? Is that why you brought up Anthony Cunningham?
That's what I brought up, yeah. He's the first guy since Cunningham in the 80s to do it.
Geez, I would have thought, not to say I would have thought plenty of lads, but now that you mention it, yeah, sure.
Captains usually rotate, though.
Yeah, true. Yeah, fair
point. Murph, have you a minor medal?
No. It's the only one I don't have.
So that okay, I was going to say surely somebody in Kilkenny has that, but
the minor in 21.
Yeah.
No. Oh, sorry, not to say no, they don't. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head.
But it's probably lads who had it and may well have won. See, the other complication in this as well is you could have lads who might have won a minor in, say, like their first year minor, and then won a 21 and could have been the captain that year, but not the captain in the minor year.
Yeah,
It takes a lot of circumstances for it to fall for you to be the captain on both teams as well.
It does, yeah, and particularly in Kilkenny, because we pick it off county champions as well. Yeah. So kind of narrows the field even more then,
Tip back that a fact is the official name of that Twitter account. I had it up. So under 20 All Ireland champions 25, under 20 Munster champions 24 and 25, minor All Ireland champions 24. Thurles CBS have won the Cork Cup, the Harty Cup in 25. Nina CBS won the Harty Cup in 24. Cashel won the Harty Cup in 23. Clonmel won the Munster B in 25. And then he finishes his tweet by saying Tipper back. It's an impressive conveyor belt, lads.
Yeah, no, it is good. I actually, the first I saw of this under 20 team was against Clare in the Munster Championship, and you just tell that evening. And I'm fairly sure Sam O'Farrell didn't start that game. I think he came on towards the end of the first half, and they were very impressive. You could just tell. Not to be hard on Clare, but I think they did well to kind of stay in touch with them. But Tipperary had a heap of opportunities that night. They looked really, really sharp, and I think when you saw them, you were just going, yeah, regardless of what way this plays out, this is a serious team, and they're going to take a lot of players from it. So no, they're fully deserving of winning it.
But their forwards unit was excellent.
They're stacked.
But everybody would look at the scoring. Everyone looked at the scoring. And I don't even know what Darren McCarthy scored from playing the final. I
think they were all frees.
But all he did, let's say, in terms of tackling, if you look in the second half, all their forwards spend time in their own half. That's a great sign. That's a super sign of a team that has a huge work ethic, and they're making their own opportunities and making life easier for the defence to back. Yeah, there's great value in that. So that's if that ethos is in your team, you're going places.
Yeah, you often find, I think, with the likes of under 20, in particular with under 20, because you may have lads who are actually with the senior team that, the likes of your Darren McCarthy or whoever, they're quite obviously zoned in on for certain attention, and really a reflection of how good your team is that the other lads around them really hurl really well. You don't have that dynamic as much with seniors, because with seniors, everybody's a senior hurler. We're all very good, brilliant. But then with under 20s, and you have lads stepping back from their inter-county senior panel into it, they're obviously marked. When we played Skehill, we played Galway in 2008, Canning, you're just going, right, lads, who's marking Canning? And then after that, it's nearly a battle of, well, who, when the matchups around the field for the rest of the players that aren't that aren't senior level, that's where the real test of the team is, So, Darren McCarthy wouldn't be the first fella like that who's senior hurler that didn't score. If he didn't score in the final in from play, it wouldn't be the first, because he's just zoned in on automatically by being their premier forward. No pun intended.
Yeah. If you're particularly cool and you want to see the post match in the weekend, Off the Ball GA on TikTok, as them all up at this stage. They're all up on the Instagram as well. Brendan Cummins, one of the guys interviewed by Stephen Gleeson after the game, got some achievement. So 30 years ago this year, he won an under 21. So he lifted the Nowlan Cup then, and now he's won it as a manager as well, making up obviously for the disappointment of last year. And I mentioned Nowlan Park. So Tipp now have won the minor titles there in 22 and 24. So 24 was the year with the two lads who were sent off against Kilkenny, and 22 was the late McCormick goal against Offaly in the minor final, and they've won the under 20 final this year after losing the final there last year. So Nowlan Park's been a happy hunting ground for them as well. Yeah, so there you go. That's Tipperary. Congratulations to them. I had a Tipperary supporter very bizarrely on Twitter last night. I stuck up a tweet. So Neil Rogers, a London manager, who would have been a teammate of mine in Burr, still a club mate of mine, even though he's been living in London for a while. I put a little tweet saying, well done to Rogie, getting London into the Joe McDonagh Cup for next year and winning the Christie Ring. And Tipperary supporter was like, so where's your congratulations to Tipperary under-20s?
You're obligatory. You're obliged to come out with that, Will.
Look, Murph, I didn't get a chance to say congratulations to PSG at the weekend. We have the Formula One. There was definitely a few things that had to come up along the way. I know exactly where they're coming from. Tipperary supporters are like, your bloody podcast doesn't give Tipperary enough credit. So there you go. Our congrats to Tipp, who I thought were absolutely excellent. Not just in the final, but all year as well. Even in that game, I'd agree with Murph, where Clare can feel aggrieved at a couple of the decisions during the game. I still thought Tipperary were the better team. I think this Tipperary team now, between minor and 20s, have been at like a really, really high level. Yeah. And the future is indeed bright for the Premier. So, let's have a chat then about the games which are on this weekend. We can talk about the finals at Croke Park a bit later on. Munster Senior Hurling Final, Murph. Cork and Limerick. Cork have to be somewhat emotionally scarred from what happened there a few weeks ago, where they were bullied and beaten by Limerick at the same venue. Or is that the perfect setup for this, where all Cork have to do all week is, let's not play like we played 3-4 weeks ago?
It depends on how Cork approach it. Like it could be a very advantageous place to come into a game, in that, their last performance, obviously it looked like there was a gulf between the teams. When that isn't actually the fact. It's just that, Limerick hit them with something they weren't expecting. Limerick were outstanding the same day, and Cork, it looks like their own standards were dropped big time that day as well. The big question is that what baggage do they carry with them now into the Gaelic grounds? Like, Limerick have to be raging hot favourites for this. And I think a lot of people, particularly Cork fans now, are going, well, how does the rest of our year hinge on this? Because, if they go out, I think we spoke about it last week, if they go out and put in a huge performance and just get beaten by a point or two, that's okay. Season's back on track. You go out and play one more match, you're back into a semi-final, playing against the Leinster champions, you're grand. Whereas if they go down here and take a bit of a convincing beating again, i.e. not at the same level, but they get beaten by 8 or 9 points, and don't look like they're ever really in touching distance to Limerick. Again, they're hurling-wise, they're a good enough team to go and beat Limerick, but it's now the psychological factors are starting to add up with them. So if this game was in Thurles, I would say something else, but Limerick are just, like, that is a fortress down there in the Gaelic grounds. I know Clare fans will say, yeah, well, we've went there a few times. Absolutely. But this is Munster final. Like, they're going for 7 in a row for a reason. There's so many aspects here where I'm like, Limerick don't drop the ball when it comes to this. Like, they come ready, they perform. Like, there's no level of ambush here with Cork. Limerick are aware that Cork are a dangerous team. They know them from the All-Ireland semi-final last year, but I think they also know how to get at them. So a lot will tell on Saturday when we see Cork in the first 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, either yes, they've banished all that baggage, they're okay, they're going to go at this now. But in the first 5 or 10 minutes, if we see a very shaky, very nervous performance, a lot of mistakes being made, whereas at the other side we have Limerick really going at the game and Limerick really performing, that's where the signs are going to be that, okay, this may be a defining game. This may be a fairly watershed moment this year if Limerick go out and beat them. So, look, it's very much a tricky one. Limerick are in a good place coming into this. Like, bottom line is, Limerick are a proud team. They're going to be saying we have this at the Gaelic grounds. We have to be, anytime we have a team on our doorstep here in the Gaelic grounds, we have to be putting in a performance. We have to beat them. And it's a Munster final as well. There's so many things here that set Limerick up brilliantly for the rest of the year. So, it's just, for me, there's so many aspects to this that it's just hard to look past Limerick. But look, Cork have a lot of work ahead of them. And either way, like, they have to just put in a huge performance against them. Win, lose or draw, they have to put in a huge performance.
Yeah. Skehill, we made the point about this new wave of inside forwards for Tipperary. I always, again, love the name on YouTube, Dwyer, Callan and McGrath, harking back to a classic one. To Skehill's point about Limerick not letting it happen again, this is about the Cork game last year. How much of this is not happening again comes down to Kiley and Connacht then. They come up with a new game plan. The Limerick players go out there and use their experience to say, not again, lads, and dominate like they did in the round robin. It seems like when Limerick have a cause, it's stronger than any game plan. I would think, Skehill, is probably a bit of both, isn't it? That
Yeah.
They would have had to look at the game plan about particularly the way that Cork were able to hit them directly last year. They would have definitely looked at the way that Cork were able to maybe put pressure onto their half-back line last year. And then also, I suppose, when you have these players with that much experience, all these All-Ireland and Munster medals behind them, the players probably solve a certain amount of the problems out in the field themselves as well.
There is, yeah, but you have to be given kind of you need to, your team has to get guidance on a certain type of principle of play. You know what I mean? So when we look at last year, Cork had and it was new. In fairness, I have to say, we hadn't seen the Limerick half back line being treated to the kind of damage that was going on ever. To be honest, lads, and it does coincide as well with. And to be fair, to the players themselves, I don't think Burns and Hannon had a great year last year. They were just off that bit of top form. Like, obviously, you can't maintain top form for the whole of your career, but they were just that little bit off, and they didn't have that kind of imperious aura that we had grown accustomed to seeing in the Limerick half-back line. Because that was the strongest line, if you ask me. Their half-back line was always the strongest line in their whole team, and kind of like a platform or a launch pad for their attacks. And even Burns, I think he got 7 or 8 points one year in the semi-final or final. So that kind of was taken away a bit by the way Cork managed to move them laterally across the half-back line and get them going back towards their own goal. And then there was a bit of luck involved too, in the sense that it was the long puck out, as I said before about Patrick Collins, and they got fruition of it. So for me, when I talk about Limerick, it's now they have the answer to the test. Like, they've seen what Cork have thrown at them from that perspective, and they can plan around it. So that could be just a situational, set up in terms of the depth you start back deeper, so you attack the ball as opposed to going under it. You have a deeper set point for your defenders, so like you get your half forward out deeper, get your midfield out deeper, and then you ask Cork then to go and play it short against you. So we've seen Limerick before, down throughout the course of the years in their tenure, that when a team goes short against them, Limerick invariably turn you over. They're really good at kind of a collective press in their forwards in the midfield. So if they set up that way and give Cork the ball, it's very hard to see the likes of Collins getting the ball to Coleman, and then Coleman going down the line to an oncoming Fitzgibbon who's moving laterally, which we've seen a lot this year, where they've managed to create these gaps and these spaces. And we said a few times, particularly on the number 12 wing, where Burns' side is. So I can't see Jeremy Burns being dragged across the pitch over to the number 7 side. I just don't see it. You know what I mean? So I think the Limerick half-back line will stay relatively static, if you know what I'm saying, within their zone. And it's going to be tricky for Cork to create that situation whereby they have lateral runners coming in into space that's unoccupied by a Limerick defender. I just can't see it, right? So for me, that's the setup of Limerick. That's number 1. But then number 2, the Limerick players themselves, it's very hard to get messages onto the pitch from a management perspective. I trust me, I know it's nearly impossible that once the players are on the pitch, it's at their own devices. You get little mini messages to individuals, but to get a collective message on the pitch is virtually impossible. So then you depend on the players themselves. Like, I can tell, from your perspective, Murph, in your day and the same in my day, you might have got an individual message for you and your marker, but for you to get a collective message on the pitch where all 15 were aware, never happened. Impossible. Yeah. Can't happen until either the start of the game, half-time, or obviously full-time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's not that's out the road. So then there's a dependency on you as players and the Limerick players, of course, to try and fix what's put in front of them. So there's a phrase you'll always hear: "You play what's in front of you." So you can have a setup, you can have a situational play, you can have answers to any kind of plethora of situations that's thrown in front of you, but you never have all the answers. You'll never have them all. There's always something that's going to get thrown in front of you as a group that you've got to fix yourself. And the Limerick team are littered with experienced, highly talented, intelligent players. So, and they're in every line, to be honest, lads. Like, you just know Nicky's extremely intelligent. I'm not going to name them out individually, but in every line, Morrissey, Nash, Burns, I'll go all the way up along, and you've got guys who can really orchestrate things for their team. If they see something in front of them, they can change the picture and then set up on a temporary basis until they get to half-time or full-time. So from my perspective, as I said earlier, Limerick have seen what was thrown at them last year. They corrected that in the Gaelic grounds a couple of weeks ago, and they're on full course now to replicate it again. So it's going to be very hard for Cork to... I just haven't seen a team break down Limerick on the short ball. I haven't seen it. And maybe I'm correct me, Les, but I have not seen it. Even when Clare went at them, Clare didn't go at them short. Clare went at them with distance and space, So I can't see like a ball going to, let's say, Patrick Collins over to O'Leary or to O'Donoghue, working out into O'Downey. I just cannot see that happen because Limerick just get too good of a press on you collectively. Their forwards are excellent at kind of inviting you to go short. And the minute you even imitate to go short, boom, you're tackled. Turnover. Do you know what I mean? How many times have we seen Hegarty, Morrissey, Gillan, Lynch turn over these lads, and then create their own opportunities and scores? Numerous. So it's a tough task, but it's certainly, I will say, it's a tough task, but it's certainly within Cork's capability, 100%. It's in their capability. And I've written down here, like, lads, I said they have to have a forceful performance. You know, I just feel like they were on the receiving end of everything that Limerick put forward a couple of weeks ago. You know, we've used this phrase before about Cork, reactive versus proactive. Limerick are always proactive. They're always doing what they want to do and what they want you to do. Do you know what I mean? So from Cork's perspective, they're a very capable team, of course, but they've got to be proactive and attack Limerick and just make sure that their own principal play is their own backs are tight and their own forwards are moving. You know what I mean? And their own forwards are turning over Limerick backs and go from there, because you used the phrase, was it Drew Murphy used to use the phrase bullying? Yeah, so bullying to me, like, everyone thinks bullying is physical. Bullying to me is when a team starts showboating, right? That's bullying. They're basically making a mockery of you. You know, showboating means no fight, if you ask me. If you're showboating, it means there's no fight around it, that they can execute these skills without no pressure whatsoever. So when Limerick started showboating against Cork a few weeks ago, that was bullying to me. That was psychological bullying, if you know what I'm trying to say. Send a message that we can do whatever we like with each other, unfortunately, and you can't do a fucking bit about it. You know what I mean? And that was the case, I'm afraid. So Cork, first and foremost, right, the performance is key. 0 to 10 minutes. We'll know then what's going to happen. 0 to 10 minutes. If they come with a forced performance thing, we could be in for a game. If not, we've seen this movie before.
Yeah. So the injury concerns for this one, so there's going to be no Ger Mellerick this time around. So it was confirmed by Pat Ryan tail end of last week. He broke his finger in the... Was it the Tipperary? No, it was the last day. It was the Waterford game, wasn't it? So Declan Dalton and Rob Downey both have hamstring injuries, not ruled out at the moment, but I don't know. Like, so Niall O'Leary's got a groin problem as well, so potentially there's an issue where 2 and 6 could potentially be an issue. Dalton obviously has been in and out between suspensions and a couple of injuries along the way too, but that's a problem, Murph, potentially in defence. Say like Jack Callahan's going to miss the game as well, a hamstring injury, so they don't reckon he's going to be back. But say if O'Leary was to be out and Mellerick was to be out as well, and say if Downey can't come back, and obviously this hamstring injury has been at him for a few weeks now, if they were to be missing their regular 2, their backup 2 and their 6, that's not easy to get your defence in perfect order if you're missing that many players.
No, I mean, like they're going to leave all hands on deck for this one, particularly Downey at centre back. Like, he's just a huge presence there. He stops that ball going through, and that being the main thing, like, just he's able to situate himself in such a way where he's able to cut off so much possession. Any ball that lands down, very much like Diarmaid Byrne, just very dominant in that area. If it lands down, very athletic, has a big reach on him, and then drives forward, has a great strike of a ball, makes good decisions. Like, it's a loss to have it there. And automatically, when you start adding up these losses, you start saying to yourself, that loss to Cork is like, if you're saying -1 to Cork, that's +1 to Limerick, because now that's an area that they could possibly win. And it's no disrespect to any player that they look to move into that position to fill in for him, but you get the feeling that they're going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul, whoever they do it. You're just pushing the issue somewhere else. Niall O'Leary as well, like, he's an outstanding cornerback, and Mellerick as well. Like the lads, we'll speak about O'Leary. He's very tenacious defender, really fast, great at getting flicks in and denying possession. Mellerick had a great game the last day as well. Yeah. Like, all of these things, if Cork don't have them on the field, it only adds more weight to the fact that Limerick have a bit more depth. And this is all, I suppose, just, I suppose, paying respect to Limerick, really, in that regard. Like, each team in this competition still at the moment have different, I suppose, the 15 that they can put out is one thing, but then also the depth they have in the bench. And in all those areas, when you start adding them up, going, okay, well, who has more depth? You have to say Limerick. They have far more All-Ireland winners on the bench. Who currently has more injuries at the moment? You're going, well, Cork look like they're going to have more injuries. We'll find out later in the week, but it looks like Cork. And all these things, when you just start totting them up, you're going, it now becomes a tougher position for Cork to actually go and mount an assault against Limerick now. But I'd agree with Skehill, like, everything we say here, it's not undoable. Like, this Cork team has serious amount of hurling in it. Like, we've seen when they get their backs up and they really go at a team, they're very dangerous. And even the likes of, if Connolly and Hayes, if they strike up front, like, they've done a lot with, not to say poor ball, but very basic ball into them. They don't need a huge amount to go right for them to create a goal opportunity. And I'm sure Limerick fans will say, absolutely rightly, down the far end, Gillan doesn't need much, or Shane O'Brien doesn't need much. Completely get that. But if we're looking at places from which Cork can actually go and beat them, you'd be thinking to yourself that, okay, if Downey isn't there, if O'Leary isn't there, Declan Dalton, yes, a loss, but they do have more forwards to come in. So, Healy last day came on, hurled really well. Lehan came on, got a score. Kingston came on. They have more lads there to replace. but you'd be relying then saying, I'd be thinking that Connolly or Hayes need to crop up fairly early with a goal here to settle this Cork team into it, and they need to sow the seeds of doubt potentially into Limerick, because if there are gaps in the back line, they really need their forwards to fire here to offset any possible chance that Limerick, hit the back of the net a few times. Or Limerick, you get the impression Limerick will hit the 30 points at this stage as well. So just, you're adding it up there going, there's quite a few things going against Cork here. But again, we caveat all of this with the fact that Cork are capable of beating Limerick. They are capable of going out and winning this weekend. But when you're looking for those markers to say, which way is this going to go? There's a few of them there, as you mentioned, Will, with the injuries that say this mightn't go Cork's way. They're just maybe not set up at the moment to actually do this.
Something that popped into my mind, Skehill, when you were talking about, the fact that maybe you felt that Hannon wasn't at his best last year. There's certain bravery, though, isn't there, in what Kiley and Connacht have done this year, whereby they very much had a winning formula. I think probably 2018 up until last year, we've spoken a few times that with the exceptions of the injuries, and I know they've been hit with big ones, like say Keane Lynch missing a whole year and so on, but if everyone was fit, you would have had a fair idea what that Limerick 15 would have been if you were saying their best 15. Do you know what I mean? For about a 5-year period, you'd have a fair idea what that team is going to be. 1 or 2 changes for injuries, suspensions, whatever, but generally you knew what the 15 was going to be. Basically, it feels to me, and I'm here to be corrected on this if it was down to injury, that they decided they were going to make a change at 6 for this season, and they used the league as an opportunity to do that. They basically made a switch at midfield and decided now is the time to go for a different pairing as well. You're taking out lads who've been in such a successful decade for the team, essentially, with O'Donovan and with Hannon, and they've gone and replaced 2 of their main pillars this season. Now, whether it's made the team better or worse is up to people to debate, but that was a huge call to make that decision, wasn't it?
It's a huge call, and the proof will be in the pudding, Will, to be fair. If they win the Munster title and go on to win the Ireland, it'll look like a genius move. That's just the nature of sport. It's always the case. So if they don't, then it's just an avenue for people to go and point towards. That's an area that potentially we lost X game because X player wasn't in X position. But the replacement that they put in for Declan Hannon a couple of weeks ago got man of the match. You know what I mean? So it's not for me. We talked about injuries before. They always had 7 defenders, right? So if Casey the poor fellow was injured or whoever was injured, they always had Morrissey to come and cover. So then when they had their 7 defenders full and fit, Kyle Hayes could go up then and graduate up to the forwards. So there was an accommodation factor. So when Keane Lynch was injured, you heard Kyle Hayes to go up in the forwards, would you? You know what I mean? So they had just a plethora of players that could accommodate each other if one was absent, right? But there are certain positions that are just, for me, are more pivotal than others. One for me is the goalkeeper for Limerick. 2 pivotal, can't be accommodated if you ask me. But the 6 can. 6 can. So you take someone like Hannon, and you have to replace him and say you can accommodate him with an excellent player like Kyle Hayes, no problem whatsoever. And then you can accommodate a midfield and put in Adam English, for God's sake. Yeah. You know what I mean? So we're talking about a level of player. They're not being replaced with sub-level players. They're being replaced with top level players, and the team then will perform as required. You know what I mean? And why are they changing them? I don't know why they're changing them. Maybe there's physical elements. Maybe that I know Hannon had injury issues, which was a groin or something going back last year, and wasn't maybe firing at 100%. And then what happens then is, let's say someone gets in and they start rolling, Will, and they start playing better. Do you know what I mean? And it's a simple avenue towards replacement. But look, from O'Donovan's perspective, O'Donovan feels like he's been out a while with injuries, just miscellaneous injuries that have been creeping up, on him for now and then. But the trouble is that for him specifically, he's been replaced by some serious operators. Like if you take Cathal Mannion and put him in there, Adam English, geez, we're talking about 2 of the best young players that Limerick have ever produced. So it's hard to see an avenue back in that team for them when the players that they've been replaced by are playing so well. So
I wonder as well, Murph, whatever with the physicality of it. So if you get to a point now where it's you have these players who've been chomping at the bit and actually have quite a few medals. I remember looking at the Fitzgibbon programme this year and you're thinking, these lads have actually won 3 and 4 All-Ireland medals, and they've kind of been on the fringes of the panel since they were very young lads. If you get to the point where you want to get game time into English, into O'Neill, you want to give O'Brien a chance up front, and it might mean that you have to take out some of the pillars, whether that be Flanagan coming out of the team, whether that be O'Donovan not starting the midfield, whatever it might be. You probably have to reward those lads, because that sends a message around to the whole panel, doesn't it? That if these guys are playing well enough, and if they're coming in and taking their chance, say, in the league, like a lot of those lads did, you got to keep playing them, because they're the guys who are, showing something for the team. Yeah,
well, the responsibility for John Kiley and Connacht and the whole management team is they have to keep competition in this team. And the one of the things that, when you're winning is that yes, everybody is loving being on the bandwagon and all that, but you still have to now figure out, well, okay, we probably have a fairly set. There was times there where they really set 15, and it was like outside of that, we even had the debate here that, you know, there's probably 4 other players that they'd bring on, but we didn't know the rest of the players. Like, it depended on which time you were to make that statement. But in order for management then to keep competition in that team, whereby, you know, your players on the bench are still chomping at the bit, thinking that if I do hurl well enough, I'll get an opportunity here. So like Kylie and Connacht, I'm sure at the start of this year, we're going, okay, well, what's the lay of the land now for us going into this championship or going into the league? And look, I mean, all these things have a natural evolution. So if they're looking at Hannon going, well, he's one of our older statesmen, it's no offence to him, but naturally things come with that of injury, of maybe not being able to put down a full year. Like we would openly say about TJ, like being TJ's managed within Kilkenny, you know, to use my own county as an example, you have to do that then. We don't know the full scenario with Hannon, for example, but let's say Kylie and lads are going, look, he has a bit of an injury there. Automatically, okay, first of all, you now have to look for a number 6 that not just for the next few weeks while he's injured, but if this injury prolongs, you go, we need someone that is steady at 6, that this system works, and regardless if we unplug someone from this system, everything still works. And also at the same time, yes, we're looking at a bench here where we have Adam English, who we know is outstanding, sitting on the bench. We've Cathal O'Neill, we've Colin Coughlin, who haven't been mainstays of this team. Yes, they've been hugely important and they've played enormous roles, but they haven't been the Dermot Burns, that's your number 5, that's that done, right, let's move on. They haven't been that type of player. So for Kylie and Connacht, they're trying to find that balance, while at the same time, like effectively their job is to say, well, what is best for Limerick hurling? What is best for this team? It's not about 100% blind loyalty to any player. It's just about having that honest conversation to say, well, okay, not every player is going to stay on the field because of injury, because of whatever this year. We have to account for every possible scenario. And also, let's say, put it on the player side, if I was in the position where I know I'm not maybe going to play for a few weeks, my mind automatically goes to, that's an opportunity for another player to actually step in and take my jersey and will be fully deserving of it. And if they're hurling well and they start the championship, well, it's up to me then to make the case as to why I have to get back in. So, you know, if Limerick supporters were looking at this going, oh, should they have to bring Hannon automatically back in? Or maybe, are they going to play him? Are they not going to play him? Like, the one thing you have to understand is that Declan Hannon understands this better than anybody, that he hasn't been playing for the last while. He may not start the Munster final. He may not come on. This may be part of him stepping away from the panel, you know, over the next... We don't know. There's a lot of things we don't know about it. But the one thing that we do know is that there's a natural life cycle within teams where, you know, you have to move your players on. And it's actually unhealthy not to rotate your team anyway. If you keep your team stagnant with a starting 15 and maybe 4 or 5 extra players that they're the only lads to come on, when those players naturally, as their aggregate age starts reaching where their retirement, you've now blooded nobody coming through. And you've also sent a message to a lot of players that regardless really how you're going, if there's players established on this panel, they're going to play. So there's a lot of things to pull apart there. But the reality is that John Kylie and Paul Connacht have to do what's best for the team. They have to pick the best players, and they cannot take reputation into consideration when you're doing that. You just have to pick, these are the best lads. And I think, to be honest as well, like if you were looking at it, they were obviously looking at Adam English in training going, lads, this lad's unbelievable. And he's getting 5 and 10 minutes. And that's what we were seeing. He's getting 5 and 10 minutes here the last few years for Limerick, or 20 minutes. But we know what his full potential is, and we'd love to have him on the field. And they've found it now. They've found it in the midfield. 2 years ago, if you said that anything other than O'Donovan and Donoghue were going to be in the middle of the field, you'd be there. No way. Absolutely no way. But this is where we are now. And would you say that the midfield line is even stronger again? You probably would, because Adam English is lethal flying forward. So, look, there's a lot to unpack in that. But I just, you know, this is just natural evolution of the teams. And you think to yourself, as dominant as Limerick are, that, oh, well, they won't have this issue. Every team has to consider, what if the player is missing and what do we do to replace him? And that's where we're at with Limerick. And
look, the other benefit is, if they decide they want to bring those more experienced players back in, you're bringing guys in with bag loads of All-Ireland medals and All-Stars in the back pocket, and you can rely on what they're going to do. So if it means you're bringing the older guard back in, it's not going to weaken that team at all. It was kind of scary when you saw half the team being changed for that Clare game, and I appreciate that Limerick lost, but I also appreciate that maybe the hunger wouldn't have been there when the result wasn't needed. You still looked at that starting 15 and you thought, geez, if Limerick picked up a few injuries, they've got lads who can slot right back into that team. So before we go on to the Hurling Pod Derby and Kilkenny and Galway in the Leinster Senior Hurling Final, who are you picking to win the Munster Final on Saturday evening, Skehill?
I'm going for Limerick, and I'm fully cognizant of the fact that I stated maybe a few weeks ago that Cork were the contenders at the time. But the landscape was far different back then in the sense that Cork were motoring everyone and Limerick were kind of stuttering.
So was that first game enough to convince you that the tide is turned back the other way?
It is because we had stated, and we put an asterisk beside it. The three of us were aligned in our thinking with this. We put an asterisk beside our permutations about our expectations for Limerick in the championship because we know what they're capable of. We know that when they have their full complement of players, that they're a juggernaut. So we put a big asterisk beside that. And next thing you know, they go out there and they play Cork and they blow them smithereens, let's say. And that was us kind of justified in our, I suppose, in our thoughts. But they're just back to where they were, Will. They're just back to where they were. And everyone knows what I mean by back to where they were. Where they were was at a level that was just so far above everyone else. That's just reality. For every other county across the country, that's just reality where it was. They were at a level that was just so untouchable, nearly, you could say, that you couldn't see a world whereby where the pack was chasing them. Remember we had said that they'd have to come down rather than the pack go up to them,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now Cork have gotten really good. Don't get me wrong, they're still an excellent team. But if they're going to go on top of Limerick on their own home ground, that's a mammoth test. I just think it's a step beyond them at the moment. I told you before, I give Cork greater chance to win Ireland than win the Munster, simply because of venue, space, etc. So I am saying it'll be Limerick by a margin. I'm going to say 4 or 5 points. To be fair.
Okay, I'll paraphrase you there slightly and say, look, forget about Tipp and back. Limerick are back. That's the real story here. What about you, Murph?
Yeah, I'm going with Limerick as well. And I actually agree with Skehill. It sounds like such a ridiculous statement when you're saying it, that Cork have a better chance of winning All Ireland than they do in Munster. But I'm agreeing with you in what it's the best way to describe it. But when I think about it down the line, and this is not the way the Cork team or panel or anything are going to be saying, this is not a conversation for them. But if you look at it, like Cork, by the natural state of affairs at the moment, and let's say hypothetically Rob Downey isn't playing, let's say O'Leary, Mellerick, they're not available, Declan Dalton's not there, all those things. This weekend is not the weekend that they're ready for this. They'll put up an admirable display, if those players are missing, but let's say they don't get over the line. And it comes back where Limerick and Cork meet in an All-Ireland final, because it'll be the next time they can possibly meet would be an All-Ireland final. All those players are back. Cork have another 2 victories under their belt where they've actually, really, I suppose, banished all those ghosts. And now they have a full bill of health and they're in a position to win in All-Ireland. Like that at the moment seems more attainable than winning the Munster final. And I completely appreciate it. Next Monday we could be sitting here with egg in our face going, how did we not see that coming? But no, I go with Limerick. And I'm going to say, even with that, I'm going to say Limerick by 6.
Okay, Cork fan Michael Buckley. I'm not going to disagree, by the way. I think it's Limerick across the board for us this weekend on the predictions the predictions table that Skehill has been keeping all season. Michael Buckley says, and he's a Cork fan, he says, Cork won't be showing their hand to Limerick until July. Just let the 2 lads know. So,
grand.
I don't think there's going to be a phony war, not to go against Michael's point. I don't think Cork will go there to put in a lacklustre display or anything to try and, catch them in the long grass when an All-Ireland semi-final or an All-Ireland final comes around. I think they'll go to try and win, but just based on what we saw a few weeks ago, it's a big gap to try and turn over.
Yeah.
Right, so we'll see how it goes. So we're all going for Limerick across the board to win this weekend. Now we get to the lads' counties against each other in the Leinster hurling final. So before that, we've the Joe McDonagh Cup final, which should be a really good affair. So Kildare are trying to go basically 2 promotions in a row. They're trying to go from the Christie Ring to the Leinster within a 2-year period. Beat Laois, and you talk about teams bullying each other. Kildare absolutely bullied them on Laois's home soil a few weeks ago. It's difficult sometimes to repeat the trick 2 times in a few weeks when you've already beaten an opponent and played them reasonably recently. But I think you probably have to make Kildare. I don't know how the bookmakers have had it. I'm not really much of a betting man, but they would have to take into account how well Kildare played that time. Charlie Dwyer, who's been really good for Laois all year, has left their panel. He had a disagreement with the management after the Carlow game, despite them winning. Then I believe, at least based on what Tommy Fitzgerald said at his press conference on Friday, that Charlie then had another disagreement with himself and Niall Corcoran in front of the other players at the recovery session the next day, and that was the end for Charlie on the panel this year. Fickrasy Fan, who's been playing in midfield, is out for Laois with injury as well. So again, that's a double blow. 2 players who would have probably started won't be around for this weekend. It's a magic story. Kildare potentially going to the Leinster final, but it's just in the back of my mind when it comes to this one, having seen these teams a few times during the year. And thankfully Clubber have again been showing the Joe McDonagh Cup, so I've been able to watch it on Saturday and Sundays as we go through. There's part of me thinking that Laois were so close to winning the Joe McDonagh Cup final last year. I think Laois may well get their earlier season form back when it comes to this final. They just about got that draw that they needed against Carlow, didn't play well against Kildare, But back just a few weeks ago, it's not that long ago, they were hammering the other teams. The first 3 games, they were kind of untouchable. I think if they get back to that form, Laois could well win this final, despite I think Kildare understandably having the hex over them a few weeks ago. So that should be an interesting one. Do either of you want to offer a prediction on this one, lads?
It's a tough one, to be honest. I suppose you'd be hoping that whatever the disagreement was with Laois wouldn't hamper them coming into the final, because it's a pity of a position that you're going in to play a final now in Croke Park, and you'd be hoping that wouldn't be a cloud over a team. Kildare have been impressive though. Like when you consider that Kildare beat Carlow and Laois comprehensively, it wasn't by accident. They were good. They're really good, really well organised. There's 2 things here in my head. One is that I think Kildare will be going into this going, nobody expected us to be here. We far overachieved, not overachieved, but compared to what people think we were going to do. So it's a free shot at winning a Joe McDonough. With Laois, though, Laois have been here. This is the other side of it. So Laois have players who have gone and have done this and have played in Croke Park and have that pain as well of last year. It's a tough one. Jesus. Just like Chad Dwyer is a big loss as well.
I was just looking through there, so I made a few notes on the phone. He basically played all of their games, and my James Duggan got a bit of the headlines because of the 5 first half goals that he scored against Kerry. Like Charlie's been doing a lot of their scoring from play. Mossy Keys have been doing all their scoring from frees. He's kind of their assigned free taker now. That they've gone through a few of them. PJ Scully's not really involved in the starting team now at this stage, and I think he's going to take those responsibilities for the weekend to come. The other thing about Kildare, I'm just looking through my notes here from the first game between them. There's so much firepower there. So David Coulter, I think, is originally from Limerick. They're a free taker, but's been up in Kildare for quite a while. He scored 2 goals from playing. He scored 6 frees within that game. But outside of that, Jack Sheridan's been scoring freely all year. He got 2 goals in the Moore Park that day. The best player I've written down here from that game was Colin McCabe, who kind of played around the 11 position, got 1-2 from play during it. Kildare have got lots of scoring in them. To me, it's no great surprise that they've had the scoring power to take on Laois, Carlow, Westmeath and win that 3 in a row period, and then finished out the job nicely against Down in the last round. So as much as I'm kind of thinking that Laois might win this, also part of me thinking you got to respect what Kildare have done up until this point. It can mean an awful lot, Scale, when a team is coming into a final in good form.
We see momentum, and I know people will point towards Laois being in the final last year and putting up a good showing, but that, truthfully speaking, that counts for nothing. It doesn't count for anything, because seasons can change, personnel can change. We already spoke about Chavez, the goalkeeper, Roland, is it?
Yeah.
So and when you picture a couple of people, like a couple of lads missing on a team that was in the final last year, makes things way different. So momentum, to me, momentum in the present counts far more than what your participation last year. You know what I mean? But still, I say that, right? And when I say that, it looks like I'm pointing towards Kildare, but I'm leaning towards Laois. Okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Laois by 2 points.
A few lads who've come in, like Carl Dunn went into goal after Enda Rowland. I had heard that Carl had been flying, so it was like there was a lot of people within Laois who weren't as concerned as I was for them when you lose a player with over 100 appearances and a guy who's a danger from frees and took their penalties and everything as well. I had 2 concerns about Laois early on, changing the goalkeeper and not having a recognised free taker coming into championship as well, but they've not had any problems with that. The only real kind of blot in their copybook is the Kildare performance, and again, similarly, Kildare's only blot was Kerry, which is way back at the start of the McDonagh. So I don't know, should be a good final. I think there's some of the 20,000 free tickets are still available for the kids as well. All the details are on the Leinster GA website if you want to go and watch it for the games for free, the 2 finals on Sunday. We're going to have Tommy Walsh watching them for us on Off the Ball across the afternoon as well. The main final of Sunday is the Leinster final. This is a difficult one, Murph, because started the championship, I don't know how much you can read into the form, because it feels so long ago when Kilkenny put a double digits defeat onto Galway. And also, the more I think about it, having watched Galway a few times since, Galway are better now than they were at Nowlan Park. So I don't know how much relevance that game actually has coming into this.
Yeah, it doesn't really have any relevance, to be honest. This really kind of feels like the first time we're going to see what both teams are really made of. Even if both teams kind of went at each other to a certain extent down below Nowlan Park, it's so long ago now at this stage, and both teams have gone through so many games where they didn't have to come out of 3rd or 4th gear. Okay, I know Galway had a little bit of a stumble there in the first game and so on, but you really feel like you don't know as much about these teams as you do compared to the Munster teams, because they've just been, it's just been so cut and thrust in Munster. But it's very hard to read this. Yeah, like, I mean, again, I mean, the obvious statement is that we'll know a huge amount after Sunday in terms of where both teams are set up. In terms of, like, let's say, even if team loses, goes into the back door, what are their odds of really going at an All-Ireland semi-final then if they're to get there? Like, there's lots of things there, but I really feel like going into this that from both teams, because the rest of the challenge within Leinster hasn't been huge or anything significant by any means, like with the likes of Wexford not performing really too well, with the likes of, you know, Dublin have had a better year, absolutely, but across the board, you know, teams' metals just haven't been tested as much as the Munster team. So it is a tough one to come into. It's a tough one to predict, but you have to say that, you know, Galway, after the Dublin performance, does look like that their stock is rising. You know, it's not the team that played in Nowlan Park, and I think particularly for Galway, you know, going into the Leinster final, they won't be overly dwelling on that. Like, this is a Leinster final at the end of the day. You know, go out and win this and you're in All-Ireland semi-final. There's a lot on the line where you shouldn't really be worried about, well, how do we hurl in the first round or round robin? So it is hard to dig into it, but I don't think that, you know, Nowlan Park 6 weeks ago or whatever makes any sort of a dent on this game, or has any sort of impression for either team, really.
Yeah, it's one of those things. When it comes to Galway, Skehill, I know a few times you were wondering kind of where they were at, how personnel were going to fall at the end of the Leinster Championship. Like, what's your assessment now as we get ready for this final of where Galway are at compared to, you were very concerned about quite a few aspects after that Kilkenny game?
Well, even before the Kilkenny game, I know myself and Murph had a bit of dialogue back and forth in terms of, I didn't know what the team setup was going to be. I didn't know what personnel was going to be in specific lines. I had said to him, you know, of the 6 lines, if you know what I mean, in the Kilkenny team, you could pick, you know, 3 or 4 of them, or even 5 of them easily at the time. Whereas at the Galway time, I didn't. Whereas, so that was then, right? And as I said previously, the landscape is different now. We seem to have more of a settled team now, and I've written down, like, we have much more of a defensive shape, which fills me with more confidence, because it just looks like Galway are getting to be a bit harder to defeat, harder to beat, harder to get through. So if you're harder to get through, you're always going to be in the fight. But I just, where our forwards are going really well. Like Brian Cannon scored, was it 5 points against Dublin? You know, it's hard for me to see that being scored off Hugh Lawler from play, to be honest. I just don't want from anybody. For Hugh Lawler is just too good. It's going to be a good contest between the likes of Burns and Mikey Butler. You know, someone's going to have to tag Cathal Mannion. Who's that going to be? That's going to be interesting one. That's going to be our guy. Like, if he plays well, we're with him with a great shout. But we need him to play well. I think at this moment in time, we don't have the luxury whereby if Cathal has an off day from play specifically, that we can come out against the team as good as Kilkenny and top. So we need him to play well. We need him to be very, very influential. We need Fleming and Whelan to do the exact same thing they did last week, which was, you know, be very workmanlike and then chip in with a couple of points when needed. But first and foremost, be the 2 dogs. I'm going to have to say it up and down the 10-12 channels and make it very, very hard to get through us. And that allows our defensive shape then to be solid, because that wasn't there in Nowlan Park, in fairness. You know, I was behind one of the goals, to say, in Nowlan Park, and it was very evident to me that the Kilkenny forwards kind of had their way with the Galway backs in terms of they were dictating moves, they were dictating even with the pace at which ball was being delivered into, they were able to point to a spot. That just signified to me there was no pressure out the field, so that the ball coming in was just impossible to contend with from a back's perspective. So I didn't blame the backs. You know, I was having issues with further out the field in which, you know, Kilkenny had their way. They could just pump the ball in willy-nilly, and Mossy Keown and Cody Conunter, like, there was no issues whatsoever. So I'm assuming, right, that that's going to be negated now at this stage, because they won't have that luxury. So that puts us in the fight. I still think Kilkenny are favourites for certain. Yeah, I don't know what the bookies have, but I would probably have a spread of like 4 or 5 points at the moment. But you'd be hoping. Do I expect Galway to win this, like, with full 100% complete confidence? No, I don't. That's straight up. I say, I know things have to go well. I know players have to have exceedingly good days, both at the back and the front. I think we can deal with our goalkeeper being suspended. I'm assuming the hearing doesn't go in his favour, so I'm presuming Éamon Murphy will get in there and have to play. That's fine. We just have to move on. And I'm presuming we have a full complement of players. The midfield area, we have to have a bit more pace, because in years previous, like Malloy, Kilkenny, they've had their way with us in terms of pace coming through the middle, which I don't want to see. And I'm assuming Adrian Mullen's going to drop in there as well. So there's loads of danger to take on from a Galway perspective. But, like, in the same breath, we've our own dangerous players too. You know, and if they fire, and that's not a big if, it's an expectant if. If they fire, you know, like Cathal, Connor, from Kenner. You know, if they fire, damage can be done, but they have to fire. So I'm Jesus Christ, I'm hopeful, really, really hopeful that they fire. Do you know what I mean? Like what I'm putting to you, right? To go back a step, right?
This is, by the way, getting into that territory of I want Galway to win because I'm a Galway man. But go on.
You see, I know exactly what Kilkenny are going to do. We've seen it, as I've said earlier, we've seen this movie before. I know they're going to come like a ravenous pack of dogs in terms of work rate. That's rule number one. I know their forwards, the likes of Cody, Keown, Massey Keown, Donnelly, you know, are going to strike hard. Billy Ryan, these lads, in good form. You know what I mean? And they'll defend ferociously. And then Murphy will be sat on the goals. That's a fact, right? I just don't know, can I have the same level of confidence in expecting the same level of play out of the Galway team? That's all. You know, and like I did say at the very start of the year when Donoghue got back in that I was accepting this year was going to be somewhat of a transition. I was accepting that we're going to probably not right off the year, maybe right off the year to a degree, and say that I'm willing for. I had said again, if I got to an Ireland semi-final, that was a very successful year for us. If we had a solid league, Ireland semi-final, I was happy. So from my perspective,
I presume you would prefer to have a year of progression in a general sense. Say like the team get to a better level than a piece of silverware. Like say if you were to win Leinster and then not play well in an All-Ireland semi-final, would you prefer that to say the possibility of the team being in a better place and maybe losing an All-Ireland quarter-final or semi-final?
Well, I think as well, the fact that because we're going toe-to-toe Kilkenny and Leinster, who are going for, Murph, help me out here, 6 or 7 as well?
6 this year, I think, isn't it?
6, yeah.
Can't remember. I think the last one was flipping 18, was it?
Yeah, Wexford won 19 and Kilkenny have
won since. So there's been quite a spell, you know, and I think Kilkenny have defeated us in probably 3 of those finals since.
Galway have never beaten Kilkenny in a Leinster final.
Not true.
2012.
Oh, sorry, 12. Yeah, since 12 then. Is it? Sorry, since the round
18.
robin came in.
Yeah,
since the round robin came in. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was 18.
No, it was 18.
18.
Ah, sugar. That's thrown it entirely out then.
Yeah,
Never mind me. Go on.
Because we didn't win
that was the Thurles one. That was Taylor Swift, wasn't it?
That was fucking Taylor Swift, the bitch. That's what we said.
That's what thrown us that day.
No, what I'm saying is, well, to answer your question very directly, I think we need to win the Leinster title.
Okay.
That'd be a super sign progression for me. And if we win a Leinster title and we progress to semi-final and we don't qualify, disappointment, yes, but would the year be termed as a success? I think it would be in comparison to years previous, you know? Because last year we were extremely disappointed in the manner in which we exited the championship. So if we manage to win a provincial title and get to a semi-final, that's success. That's in fairness, you know. Yeah. But for a county like ourselves, that has to be the case. You know what I mean? And but again, Kilkenny they're a very, very capable team. You know the way they perform at Croke Park. More often than not, it's easier to point towards. You know, it's easier to count in one hand the bad performance they've had in Croke Park versus the good. You know, that's how good they've been in Croke Park and same terms with the years. And that's through the different generations of teams. So regardless of venue, it's going to be a very tough task. But I'm hopeful.
Okay. Cathal Mannion and Adrian Mullen both up for media on Tuesday in Croke Park. I'm going to assume they're not marking each other at the weekend just gone by. The OG, Tiago Silva, very nicely pointed out last week how blunt Murph was when I asked him about a question about Adrian Mullen. I was like, what's the crack with him playing at 6? Murph went, I'm not picking the team. I have no idea.
Well, best way I could answer, to be honest. I don't know. Sometimes you just have to be very honest.
Yeah, the OG said he nearly spat out his drink while he was listening to that at the time. Who does pick up Cathal Mannion, though, Murph? Because Reid, it seems, is not entirely back. So I was just reading Derek Ling's comments. I have to go back to the last group game because Kilkenny aren't doing media until tomorrow, so they haven't spoken recently. He said he wasn't sure whether Owen Cody would be back in time for the Leinster final and wasn't sure if Richie Reid was going to be back in time either. He said it was a case of waiting and seeing at that point. But that's a couple of weeks ago since the last group game. So I'm not sure if they're going to be back or not. But who do you reckon goes on?
Can I ask Murphy a question?
Yeah,
genuine question. It leads this way. Like, you remember when Kilkenny were playing Clare in the semi-finals there, they put Mikey Butler on the Tony Kelly task. Now, I don't believe Kilkenny would have the same level of danger for Cathal Mannion as they do with Tony Kelly. So I just think whoever Cathal Mannion situates will be marked by that person in that position. Is that fair to say?
I'd agree with you on that one because, like, when I've been looking at Cathal Mannion over the last while, it's been kind of. I'm not going to say, like, obviously he's done well and he's been hurling really well, but he's been given quite a lot of space just individually by his own man marker. Like, if you look at Conor Whelan at the other side, where he's so tightly marked the whole time, Mannion is. Maybe it's that he's deceptive and he just slips away from lads, but he's managed to create a lot of space for himself. I'd be saying, lads, look, wherever he pops up, I wouldn't like to ruin the dynamic of the team to follow Cathal Mannion. Whereas with Tony Kelly, when he's firing, you're going, Jesus, Tony Kelly could absolutely, tear the place asunder if you don't mark him. So I just think that wherever he pops up, at the risk of disrupting your team to go and mark one man when they then throw a spanner in the works and he's in full forward or he's out wing forward or whatever, and he confuse you, even possibly drift as far as midfield, although I don't think they'll do that. I don't think you try and disrupt your own team by saying, listen, right, Mikey, you follow him or whatever. Wherever I think he turns up, you'll be told to mark him very tight. And the big question you'll be asking then from, let's say, the half back line, you'd be saying, right, well, if he drifts up as far as midfield, do I still go with him as far as midfield? Or do you want me to just to sit a small bit and be onto the midfielders to make sure that they kind of pick up that area or whatever? So that'd be the questions I'd be asking, but I wouldn't. No, I just think wherever he goes, the man marks him and off you go, because obviously he's a great player and he's very influential and he's the main man that you're going to be looking to shut down for Galway. But I think, again, when Kilkenny sit down and do numbers of, well, does that mean that we completely disrupt and we have to target him? I don't think so. I think as a unit they shut him down, try and shut him down. I think that's the way they approach it. So no, I'd agree with Skehill there. I don't think that they'll necessarily deploy a man marker to him necessarily. Because the thing is, like, he'll most likely start centre forward. Will he start centre forward, Skehill? Most likely. Yep. Depending on who's there. Like, you're committing your centre back to go man mark a fella, first of all, which disrupts the centre of your defence if you go follow him. The other side is then, do you bring someone else across or out, and then your centre back has to drift somewhere else? Like, there's a few moving parts here that I think outweigh where you just go, lads, as a unit, stick up on your men, get tight, close him down as a unit, and keep an eye on Mannion. That'd be the one then where if he drifts and whoever centre back loses him, make sure you pick him up. But I think Kilkenny kind of just look at it and go, no, we have enough strength here as a unit and cohesion as a unit to just go and perform and outshoot him at the other end.
I guess my next question is entirely redundant. I'm assuming that you're both going for your own counties to win, right?
I am. Yeah.
Fair enough. Scale, you're not going to throw a
spanner
in the works here and go.
I'm not. I just think the level of confidence that Murph has in Kilkenny is justified.
Yeah.
You know, where mine is, I'm just a bit sceptical all the time. I'm happy with the Dublin performance. Don't get me wrong. I was content with the West performance, but I'm just not as I think I have right to be, not to be as confident as you are, Murph, in your country, to be fair. Now, if they come out and they blow the hinges off the door, or the door off the hinges, rather, and they beat Kilkenny, Jesus, then it's different. They've backed it up on a number of occasions. Then now you can expect it for the next day. Whereas now I'm just kind of going, oh, I really, really wanted to win, but I don't know. I don't know. I have to use that one again. Look, my head is telling me that we're up against it. You know, we really are up against it. My heart's telling me we're going to win, but you're in yourself. The head is more logical than the heart. So
it is indeed. Fair point made by Joseph Stewart on the YouTube last week as well. Galway conceded 8 goals against Kilkenny, Wexford, Dublin, and they scored only 1 goal in those 3 games. So
that's correct.
It's potentially an issue for Galway going into the final. And there was a couple of other quick hits I want to do before we finish, because I'm mindful we've hit the 90-minute klaxon mainly due to our half an hour deviation away from hurling at the start of the pod.
We'll have to put up a health warning for the listeners, because I know some lads will get straight to business.
Yeah, it sounds like, where's the preview? All I want to hear is Cork Limerick. I don't care. It's nearly one. You should put up a poll before you release it. None of you put up your thing saying we've recorded, it'll be out later on. Yeah.
Which one of these was discussed? And put up like grizzly bears. There's definitely some haymakers in there.
Parachuting.
Grizzly bears, parachuting, and then pick another. And that's the one that hasn't been brought up.
Murphy gets a helicopter.
I've an even better idea. I'm going to put all 3 onto it and then actually tell people after the poll they're actually all in there. Grizzly bears, parachuting. What was the other strange thing that happened?
Well, there was plenty of things. There was parachuting, there was kangaroos, there was helicopters, there was what else
tanks.
Was there? Kangaroos in Galway, that was one of them.
The price of tanks.
Yeah.
The price of tanks. Not septic tanks or slurry tanks.
Warfare tanks.
Okay. We'll do the last 2 questions. I'll do the poll while we're doing that. I'll give them time before it actually drops. So I can actually take this one, which was come in. Question for the pod, might be devil's advocate. Do the wins for London and New York show just how far back other counties are in the lower tiers of hurling? Is that really a good thing?
That's not fair.
To take it backwards, the really good thing part is I think there's now going to be an issue, particularly with New York. So New York have won. We mentioned quite a few of the counties they were playing against, and Lorimar were unhappy about the fact that they were able to skip the group stage, as New York footballers do in the Tailteann as well, and come directly in at the knockout stage. Now, when New York footballers come in the preliminary quarter-final, again, it's a bit shitty on Leitrim, who don't qualify even though they finished 3rd in the group because New York are coming in at that point. And I appreciate the logistics for New York, but when it comes to the hurling, the idea of coming in at a semi-final stage, like, I want them to have a championship they can play in, because otherwise it's just the Connacht hurling league that they play in and there's no championship for them whatsoever. But like I looked at that panel and I was just thinking there was 3 lads there who would have played Westmeath minor. They had a former Cork senior. They had 5 lads from Tipperary. And I think they had a couple of other lads who would have played underage for our counties before moving over to New York. And then the small matter of Johnny Glynn, who hurled in senior championship in Leinster last year for Galway as their captain. Like, that's stacked by comparison to any of the teams that they're going to be playing at Lorimar level. And I think as they start to move up, the GA are going to have a problem next year, because it's like they're coming back in for the first time since, correct me anyone in the comments are wrong, I think it was 2006 since they played in the championship. And I'm sure the GA were keen to get them back in, so you allow them to skip the group stage. They start coming up the levels, and say if they do well again next year, at what point do you cut that off and say, actually, we can't afford to be letting you skip 4 or 5 matches here? I think that's going to create a huge problem for them next year. And look, there's loads of romance. Like, the boys came, they were training away, I think in Castletown and Westmeath, getting ready for that final. And like, they've got a guy who's a native American from New York. He's Irish American, but was born in America, on the panel. And Johnny Glynn brought him up to lift the cup. And there's all that kind of loveliness about the story. And I love the guys who go abroad have a chance to hurl. But there has to be a fairness for the teams that are in the competitions around them. London, let's see what their ceiling is this coming year, because they're going up to the Joe McDonagh now. As I mentioned, Neil Rogers, who was a club mate of mine in Birr before he went over to London, is their manager. Anthony Nash, as people are probably aware, is part of the backroom team. They had David Devine from Westmeath, who was playing for Warwickshire last year, came in this year to London, and he scored 112 in that final against Derry. Again, that's 3 years in a row that Derry have lost the Christie Ring final, so they're kind of knocking on the door at that level, but it just hasn't quite happened for them in the finals. Again, you got to wonder about how London are going to integrate in. So obviously London will play in the group stages, and it's a little bit easier logistically for them to play in the group stages of Joe McDonagh, and it's going to give a couple of counties a nice trip over to London to play next year in the second flight hurling competition. But New York are a different story. And I just think, I don't know how you guys feel, but like New York for me are able to draw upon resources. London is slightly different. Obviously there is a bit more of an exile happening now compared to say 5 years ago, where a lot of lads were home for COVID. And Joe McDonagh is going to be a serious standard of quality for them. But when New York are coming up the levels, lads, the quality of player that they can actually draw upon there is going to be stronger than some of the counties that they're going to be playing against.
Well, like, firstly, I think I think we can all agree that we're delighted that London and New York are able to participate in championship.
Sure, yeah.
But I do have to say that it needs to be on a basis that it's a quality of opportunity. You know, they have to start at the same level in the same playing field as every other county, because from a resource perspective, you just get the feeling, now I could be wrong here, that London and New York could call on more in terms of whether that be finance or even the players, because they're drawn for professional purposes through their work, right? So if they start going up through the levels, they have to start at the same starting place. Now, and you say, oh, that's not fair in New York in terms of travel. That's just the way the cookie crumbles, my friend. I'm sorry, you know, if something can be put in place to assist them somehow, whether that's financially or even time perspective, I don't know, but you have to have a situation where you go up the levels. If they go into serious competition where counties on the island are trying their damnedest to perform and get up, you have to start from the same place. You have to, in my book. You have to.
Dare I suggest one thing, right? So the GA has money overflowing out of the coffers at the moment, right? So if you want New York to play in the lower tier competitions in the hurling, wherever that may fall as they work their way up along, could we not have a nice situation where the GA might part fund or fund a trip for some of the teams in the group stages against them?
Of course you could.
Where, like, you know, this year that could have been, say, Cavan or Monaghan or Leitrim or some of the teams we were playing against could have had a weekend in New York.
Sure, they ought to do it.
With the Connacht football, yeah, but why not have it that...
Like, Galway went to New York there, was it this year, lads, is it?
It was, yeah.
They're part funded.
Yeah.
Do you mean, now it's a tough trip, as from talking to some of the players, it's a tough trip, like a 4-day wraparound. You know, it's tricky on the Galway perspective, but it's done. It's been done for a long time, I think, in this instance. And same in London. So, look at the GA, it's all down to if they want it to be done, it can be done. No problem whatsoever.
I think it could be a nice little incentive for teams who are playing lower down the food chain. That, you know, there's a couple of away trips, say, for teams to go to New York, so 2 counties get a weekend in New York.
I tell you, well, there's no halfway venue anyway.
No, there's not. It's played over the Atlantic. No.
They go over there, come over here. Simple as that, lad.
Yeah, and look, maybe you can structure their games that they come over for, say, a 2-week period. This feels a bit like we're getting back to the NFL here, when the NFL come over to London and play 2 games, you know, in a row, and they're over for a period, and then they go back after that. Like, maybe New York can do that. Their first 2 games are away. Say they play 2 home games, and then they come back to Ireland on the far side of it, and you enable 2 of the teams in the round robin to go across to New York to play, and they get a lovely weekend out of it. Maybe that's a way around it for next year.
Possibly, yeah.
I just think you can't have it where they drop in the knockout stages. It's just not fair.
Great.
Okie dokie. And then 2 other quick fire ones before we get here. The first one came in from a Kilkenny supporter who's left hand on top. Can you ask Murph about what's gone drastically wrong? And this is focused very much on the underage. Not producing any kind of forward at the moment. Under 20 team from 2 years ago that won. Not one of them can make the current senior team. Is there any reason they're not coming through?
I wouldn't say it's drastically wrong. I mean, like, we're competing in the minor final last year. We're in the 20 this year, and then the minors are still in competition.
Yeah, you could do a Leinster sweep potentially over the next few weeks.
Yeah, like, I mean, sorry, go on.
Like, look at your 6 forwards.
I know, yeah. Like that.
What are we talking about here?
This is what I'm getting at. Like, it's drastically wrong. Like, I mean, again, people often pick the wrong words here to say that things are gone absolutely horrendously wrong. Like, Kilkenny will have been disappointed that they haven't returned more from the finals they've been in over the last few years, certainly. But things being drastically wrong. Like, I'm looking at lads coming through there. There's plenty of lads coming through that I'm going, they have serious potential. And realistically, from each panel, like, we were looking there during the week. Kilkenny Supporters Club put up that the 2008 team that I played in, someone asked me, how many did you take from that as a panel that actually played senior for Kilkenny? Let's say for either a few years or actually long term. And there was 10. Drastically unusual that actually happens. It's only kind of 2 or 3, and that's the reality of what's happening. Do I see within those 20 panels and those minor panels that there is lads? Yeah, absolutely. But I think when lads look at it, they're looking for this glaringly obvious, lad shooting the lights out. Darren McCarthy, for example, that doesn't come along that often. Drastically wrong, completely disagree with that. There is no drastically wrong there. And even if you look at it over the last few years, like, I mean, the Kilkenny schools are competing, albeit not as dominant by any means. Turles and Nina and these lads are also competing really well. But is there still pools of young players coming through? There absolutely is. And this drastically wrong now. I wouldn't agree with that. I think Kilkenny were used to having years ago where you had the transition of bringing through lads who were in the 20s, and they were quite, not to say pivotal, but they were on the verge of being really pivotal with the senior team, and that was very obvious. But it's tougher to make that jump at the moment. You look at any county, there's not that many players that are as dominant. Like under 21 years ago, with that, even with that extra year, you could have more players involved there that are also involved in your senior team. But now at the moment where it's under 20 and it's minor, the under 20 in particular, with that 1 extra year taken off, it does, I think across the board with every county, it does make it less apparent as to where the players are coming from there. Like if you give that 1 more year and you bring it back to under 21, you can actually see players who are like, oh yeah, you were in the right position here to actually go and be part of a Limerick, a Cork, a Kilkenny panel. But no, just coming back to the question, I would disagree with that.
It's no exact science either. So I was thinking of Cork a couple of years ago, who had a good physical panel and lads who looked like they were ready at under 20s. Some of those lads have had to wait and made their senior debuts this year. Obviously, lose one of their key players to Munster rugby as well. So it's not as simple as looking at it and saying, right, these guys are naturally going to go through. I think Offaly were a very different case last year because Offaly seniors just didn't have that quality. So therefore, a lot of them were going to transition naturally into it. And in Tipperary's case, I think Liam Cahill has been very cleverly blooding these lads over the last year and a half. And it's been very clear since these lads were 16 or 17 that there's some exceptional talent on that under 20 team. And so their development has been fast-tracked a little bit. So it's not exactly working that because you've got a very good under 20 team that they're necessarily going to be stellar seniors already just coming out of under 20 as well. And the last one is very much for you, Skehill, before we finish up the main pod for this week. And I'm intrigued, and if I was a non-member, I'd probably use one of my listens to find out what Skehill's list is going to be. Declan Howran was in contact as well. Pod question, dead serious. Next year, Hoggy, Bennett, Noel McGrath, maybe try out in goals. Rationale, no such thing as great saves required, only bad shots in hurling. So you could take your eye out from 60 yards with a pass and have a long strike and free taking capability, which is the reason you'd put them in goal. Declan says, this is not as crazy as you might think. P.S. I don't know if Galway have an older guy at the moment that could go there, but Canning maybe could have got 3 or 4 more years from it as well. You'd get 40 out of the lads in goals. He feels that some of these were better players than Dowling even, and he doesn't look out of place at senior inter-county stepping back in. I suppose the only thing about Dowling, just to take his last point, is Dowling had a good bit of club goalkeeping experience behind him before he came in. It wasn't just a case of Patrick Horgan, here's a shirt going goal. But the idea, Skehill, as a goalkeeper, that these outfielders could potentially retrain and play there and still keep their inter-county season going, or career going, I should say.
Yeah, they certainly could go in goals, but would they operate at the level at the top grades at the moment? The answer is no.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree with that, no.
I don't know. I know like Moore Murphy plays outfield for his club, doesn't he, Murphy?
He does, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he plays to a level, like say, but in terms of, take TJ, for example, right? would he go in and be as effective as Owen Murphy? Not a notion. You know what I mean? Like, striking is only one element of it. It's a big element, don't get me wrong, but there's loads more to it. Like, there's loads more to it. And I just think, personally speaking, you have to be not born into it, but you have to have played it for a number of years to have the true grasp of it. You know, there's a lot to goalkeeping. So I take your man's question. I just don't agree with it. I don't think it'll be as effective. Like, would Patrick Horgan go in goals and be better than Patrick Collins? The answer is a categoric no, not a notion. No. Is there any player at the minute in their current teams, you know, despite how good they are, that could replace their current goalkeeper? No. Cathal Mannion is our best stuff forward at the moment. Would he replace Derek Fahey? Nope. Not a notion.
I think on the point about Murphy and Quaid, who also comes into mind here, because Quaid plays centre half back for his club, I think, as well. These are lads who've been playing for a long period of time as inter-county goalkeepers as well. I just wonder, when you get into your 30s, is it a different thing to then switch into goal at that point? I'm not saying that some of these might not have the attributes. They might actually have really good reflexes and be a good goalkeeper. But to me, it feels like you're a long way back in your development of the other goalkeeping skills if you've naturally been a forward or a midfielder, as these guys have been named out here.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah.
Don't know. Look, that's one to have a think about. For this week, anyway, Paul Murphy, thanking you.
Thanks very much.
James Skehill, pleasure as always.
Cheers, folks.